What's up, y'all? Welcome to TheProtoArt. Today, I'm diving into the latest update to DiffusionBee version 2.5.3. Whether you're new to AI art or a seasoned creator, this guide will help you get the most out of DiffusionBee, an AI art app that allows you to run StableDiffusion locally. I'll start by breaking down essential terms and concepts, and then move on to new features like Flux and embedding support. I'll also touch on some important features that are still missing in the update. I'll provide links to resources as well as timestamps if you'd like to skip ahead. Because this is an overview of the entire app from beginning to end, and I have covered certain sections of the app previously, I will be implementing parts of older videos in this video, pausing periodically to address any updates and changes that have occurred since the time of that release. This includes weights and LoRa support. With that being said, feel free to grab a snack or some drinks and join along if you'd like, or grab a notepad and pencil, and let's dive into this. Let's start with essential terminology for beginners. Before we jump into the app, let's go over some important terms you need to know. These will help you understand how to use DiffusionBee effectively and make the most out of its features. First things first, in layman's, what is StableDiffusion? StableDiffusion is an AI model that generates images from text prompts. Prompting is the process of giving text input to guide the AI in image generation. Prompts can range from simple descriptions to detailed multi-instructions. Good prompts often balance the creativity and clarity to produce the best results. What are embeddings? Embeddings are pre-trained vectors that help AI interpret specific styles, themes, concepts, or even characters within a prompt, allowing for consistent styles across multiple images. For an example, I prompted in DiffusionBee Betty White sitting on an airplane reading a magazine wearing a business suit. Now, it's pretty accurate to how she looks in general, although there are some noticeable things that need to be improved on, like text, hands, and the face overall. However, you can utilize pre-trained embeddings. Using pre-trained embeddings, for example, from the website civitai, I found a model already pre-trained on Betty White. I downloaded this model and installed it on DiffusionBee. So without the pre-trained embedding, although my prompt is pretty decent, it could be improved. Using the embedding that's pre-trained on Betty White's face, it gave me a more accurate depiction of how she looks and improved overall quality of her face. There are still some noticeable things that could be fixed, as I mentioned before, like hands and text. These can be fixed using other techniques. Let's continue with some of the terms, and this will all make sense in the end. Image weights. Image weights are parameters that control the influence of a different element within a prompt. Adjusting these can help refine a final output and better match your vision. Safetenors. Safetenors are a secure and efficient file format for loading AI models, designed to prevent malicious code from execution. Prior to safetenors, there were CKPT files. Think of it like a zip folder with the information inside of that folder. A safetenor, as the name says, is a safer format utilized to lowering the risk of potential malicious code that could be executed inside of that folder. LoRa, low rank adaptation, a method for fine-tuning StableDiffusion models with fewer computational resources, allowing for custom styles or specific feature enhancements. Think of it like a shrunk-down, compressed version of a safetenor. These tend to be significantly smaller in size, as on average, CKPT files or safetenor files can easily range a few gigs in size, versus a LoRa or an embedding, which can be a couple hundred megabytes or even a few kilobytes. Flux Models. Advanced models offering enhanced image quality, speed, and accuracy. Flux models are particularly good at improving text clarity and rendering complex features like hands. Pony models, otherwise known as Pony diffusion models, are specialized StableDiffusion models. These models are highly customized and are used to create a lot of safe-for-work content, otherwise known as SFW, and not safe-for-work content, otherwise known as NSFW. These models are trained on a vast dataset of cartoon art and pony-related art, making them particularly good at generating characters, scenes, styles reminiscent of My Little Pony and more. Safe for Work mode, a feature that allows you to toggle off not safe for work content generation, making the app suitable for professional and public environments. XL LoRa and XL models are advanced model types for detailed, fine-tuned, and higher resolution outputs. Think of it as an upgraded version from the base StableDiffusion model. Negative prompting is a technique where you specify what not to include in a generated image. This feature currently is not supported in Flux within DiffusionBee. Samplers. Note, although DiffusionBee does include some samplers, there are quite a few that are not currently included in the application. Some types of samplers are K-Euler Ancestral, otherwise known as K-Euler A, known for generating high-quality images quickly, often requiring only 20 steps to achieve good results. This is ideal for fast iterations. DDIM, Denoising Diffusion Implicit Models, requires more steps, typically around 40, but offers more precise control over image generation process, which can be beneficial for detailed work. KLMS balances both speed and quality, producing smooth, high-quality images with fewer steps than DDIM, but more than K-Euler A. DPM++ 2M KARRAS is an advanced sampler that can produce high-detailed images with fine control, useful for complex prompts and high-resolution outputs. The choice of samplers affect both quality and efficiency in image generation. Beginners might prefer faster samplers like Euler A, while more experienced users might opt for something more along the lines of DDIM for more control. Step counts. One key feature in generating high-quality images with StableDiffusion is the number of steps you use. Step counts refer to the number of iterations a model goes through to refine an image. As the example of the image on the screen shows, with few step counts, there's a lot of visual noise and no real clear image. As we increase the step count, the image becomes more in focus. Fewer step counts result in faster outputs, but might lack detail, whereas too many steps might not significantly improve the image after a certain point and can just slow down the process. For example, using a sampler like DDIM, increasing the step count might improve the image, whereas using a sampler like K-Euler Ancestral, the image quality doesn't necessarily improve if you increase the step count. Flux models and step counts. Currently, at the time of this recording, there are 3 different kinds of Flux models. Flux Model 1 Pro, designed for high-quality images. This model may benefit from higher step counts and can produce detailed and high-polished outputs. Flux Model Dev, which is available within the DiffusionBee application itself, can produce really high-quality images and requires fewer steps than the Pro model, although the quality may not be as fine. Flux Model 1 Schnell, which is the quickest out of the 3 options and also available within DiffusionBee, requires less steps than the previous 2 and can produce really good results, although the quality may be a little less than the other 2. In some cases, as reported within the Discord itself, you can produce some really high quality images with as little as 4 steps. Note, the image on the screen was produced with the Dev model with 2 steps, whereas this image on the screen was produced with the Schnell model with only 2 steps. The Dev model tends to require more steps for better quality images. Let's take a quick look at some computer specs and performance benchmarks. Different Mac setups and hardware can significantly affect your experience. Based from the user experiences posted on the Discord, I made this simple little graph. M2 chips with 24 gigs of RAM drastically reduce the image generation times, especially with Flux Schnell models. Here's a quick comparison. I personally tried using my older Mac M1 Mini with 8 gigs of RAM running the Schnell model with 1 image. With only 15 steps, it still took around 8 minutes to generate an image. Another user running an M1 Mini with 16 gigs of RAM and running the Schnell model with only 1 image and 2 steps was able to accomplish this within about 1 minute and 4 seconds. Notice as the RAM increases, the amount of time to produce the image significantly reduces as well. So note, older computers may take a little longer to generate images running the Flux models. Before we dive into the app, let's quickly cover what's missing from DiffusionBee, although I may not have included everything in this quick list. Currently, there's no support for XL LoRa models, and XL models are limited to what's within the application itself. There's no support for Pony models. There's no option for auto updates, as users need to manually update the app. You're limited to the resolution that can be produced for the images within the application to 1024 by 1024 resolution. There's no option to send images from text to image or image to image to Illusion Generator. Currently, there's no option for negative prompting with Flux or an option for Inpainting with Flux within DiffusionBee. Now that we have a basic understanding of what some of these terms mean, I'll go more in depth with those a little later on in this video. But first things first, let's get the application actually installed on your computer. So DiffusionBee is a Mac-only application, at least at the time of this recording, that you can download either directly from diffusionbee.com or from GitHub itself. I would personally recommend going to github.com as it tends to be more current with the latest models versus from diffusionbee.com itself. So through GitHub, I'll provide the link below, but in layman's terms, DiffusionBee is the easiest way to run StableDiffusion on your Mac locally without needing any knowledge or technical skills. To get the latest release, you'll scroll down on GitHub. Under the Releases tab, you'll click on Releases. From here, you'll see the latest release from DiffusionBee. There's been quite a few models. I'd recommend getting the latest version if you can run it on your computer. Version 2.5.3, as it states, now supports Flux image generation models only for ARM64 and Mac OS 13 Plus. So make sure that your computer is compatible to run Flux models. To use Flux, scroll down to the bottom of the app home screen, which I'll show you how to do in a moment here. As it also states, it now supports external textual inversion embeddings. It also has the ability to block not safe for work images, a more organized models page, and several bug fixes. Once you've found the version that's compatible with your computer, you hover over the DMG file and click it to download. It'll save it locally to your computer. Now navigate to where you saved it on your computer. Double-click the DMG file. You'll note if your computer can actually run it, as if it's not compatible, it will be grayed out and have lines through it. Since my computer is compatible with this version, I can drag and drop it to my applications folder. I've already done this, so I won't do it again. Now navigate to your applications folder and find DiffusionBee. Double-click the version 2.5.3. Upon your initial launch of the application, you'll probably be prompted to install a few different things to get started. You should make sure that you do have enough space on your computer for everything to install. A few things that are needed to install are Controlnet models. Note, currently, you also can't install external Controlnet models. You're limited to what's inside the application itself. Some of the models that will install are Controlnet Scribble, Bodypose, Depth Map, and a few others. Some updates, as older users may notice, as the layout of this page. Now it's separated into different sections. You have your StableDiffusion models at the very top. If you scroll down, there's now a separate section for LoRa. Scrolling down further, you'll also note there's a separate section for embeddings now. At the very bottom of this, you'll note the available XL models that you can download. Again, you're limited to what's inside of DiffusionBee as far as the XL models are concerned. At the top of this page, let's go through what each tab will do. If you're on a different section of the application, you can always navigate to this models page by clicking on the Import Models tab, which will bring you back here. Underneath that is a help model page, which will bring you to the website, diffusionbee.com, which does cover some genuine questions and examples of what some of these things will do. Underneath that is an option to load the Discord, which you would have to join, and you can see the chat, which covers a lot more information. A lot of users have a lot of helpful sections, such as the FAQ page, which answers a lot of common questions that users may have. You have the option to show logs, model licenses, open source licenses, about, contact us, report issues, settings, and the option to close. Next to this is a queue window. This essentially shows us how many images are still being generated and how much time is remaining on the current generation. To the very left of our screen is a home screen button. From the home screen, you can either access all of these by clicking on the individual buttons, or going on the row right below it can access the same thing. Let's go back into our models tab first and get started by importing some models and embeddings. To import models, you can click on this blue button here that says Import Models. This will open a brand new window for you. This drop-down menu allows you to import models from your computer. You can import LoRa, embeddings, or straight from Hugging Face. Let's start from Hugging Face first. If you do not enter the correct model ID, you will get an error code like what you see on the screen currently. If I were to copy and paste from Hugging Face this entirety of this and try to hit fetch, I will encounter this error code. So you only need, as the example shows, the second section of that. So if I paste, I don't need the first part that says huggingface.co. I can delete that. I only need the section that says stability, etc., and hit fetch. This might take a little moment for it to pull up the model information from whatever model that you're sourcing. Now you'll see the model ID, which is the name I posted, and the items that it was able to find. And I can click the download button and it would continue to start to install that model. I don't need this because the base model is already installed. From launching DiffusionBee, there's the StableDiffusion 1.5 model that comes with it, a modified version that was created from the dev himself, which works really well. But again, you can also install XL models directly within the app. If I go back to the import models option, I'm going to click on the import models again. This time we're going to import an embedding. I've done this before with the example of Betty White, but I'll show you how that works. So I'll delete this first. So now it's out of DiffusionBee. If I wanted to reinstall that model, I will go back to the top, and under import models, I'll click on that once, and then import embeddings. You'll navigate to where you have your embedding saved. Note, if the embedding has a .pt at the end, those are not compatible with DiffusionBee and won't install. They have to have a .safetensor at the end of the embedding. So I'll go back to the example I had on civitai and re-download Betty White. So you'll notice it has .safetensor at the end. Now under import models, import embeddings, I'll navigate to where I had Betty White installed. Click on it once and then press open. Now it'll start importing the model, and because it is such a small model, it imported really quickly. Now if I scroll down to my embeddings section, you'll see now I have the option that says Betty White again. As it says here, to use the embedding, simply use the trigger word in the prompt. The trigger word should automatically be highlighted. Note, as the information states, when you have the correct trigger word used in your prompt, it'll be highlighted, as you can see. If I have it misspelled or if I'm missing a part of that trigger, it's not going to be highlighted. Also note, you can layer up multiple embeddings as well as multiple LoRa. On top of the embeddings, you have the option to import LoRa files. Again, just like embeddings, you'll have to navigate to where you have these stored locally. You can use external resources like civitai to generate different LoRa. Just make sure you have them labeled correctly and know where you have them saved. Because it is quite small in size, it'll load pretty quickly. And I'll know when it's loaded if I scroll down to my LoRa section. The latest of your installed LoRa or models will be towards the bottom of that particular part of the list. So now I can see black and gold epoch number 2. That's now currently loaded. You'll do the same thing if you're loading base model CKPT files or base model safetensor files as well, except those will take longer because they are larger in size, around 2 gigs on average. When loading a model from services like civitai, make sure that you have the correct filters to find compatible models that run on DiffusionBee. You can do this by going to wherever your model is located, or if you're searching for models, go under filters, and then you can choose embeddings, checkpoints, LoRa's. Under the base models, you can choose anywhere from StableDiffusion 1.4 to StableDiffusion 2.1. Again, XL models are currently limited to what's available within DiffusionBee to be able to import. Once you do choose the file that you want, again, you would go to import, locate the model that you have, whether it's a LoRa or a base model, and import it into DiffusionBee. Let's navigate to our home screen by clicking on the home button on the left side. Now you have multiple categories to choose from: text to image to image, AI canvas, illusion generator, inpainting, upscaler, and training models page that we just navigated away from, our history tab, Flux, LoRa tools, interpolator, and Deform video. Let's go from the very top and work our way down. Under text to image, you can either open it by clicking the open button here, or the icon that looks like a piece of paper underneath the home button there. Either way, we'll navigate to the same location. So let's click on that once. By default, your page will look something like this, although you can toggle things to access more options. So on the top window here is where you can enter your prompt. Prompting is the process of inputting the text to generate an image. So this is when you're asking StableDiffusion to create a specific kind of image. So let's just prompt something brand new. So I'm going to prompt a puppy with a red shirt. And under our drop-down models option, we can see the default model that comes with it, which is 1.5. the default SD underscore 0.1, which is like a modified Stable Diffusion base model that I would say personally is a little better than the default that comes with it. And then you have the option to install the different Flux models. So you have the Dev and the Schnell model. I've personally gotten better results using the Schnell model because I have an older system and it's just easier to run on my computer. But you can use the Dev model if you have the specs that can handle that resource. But feel free to run the Dev model and try what works best for you and your computer. Underneath this, we have the Advanced Options toggle. So if we toggle this on, it now allows us to select specific resolution of our images. And again, DiffusionBee can go up to 1024 by 1024. When testing out a prompt, I would probably keep it around the default settings of 512 by 512, as this is a lower resolution image, but it's good enough to kind of see what the overall image will look like. If you ever forget what some of these things do, if you hover over this little eye icon, it will kind of tell you what these all do. So the Models tab is a Stable Diffusion model used to generate the images. So that's what this section is. If you go down further and don't remember what the number of images is, hovering over that will show you. This shows you how many images are generated in the total. So how many images you want to make at a time. Think of it like a batch. If we're making a batch of cookies or something, right? So currently it's set to 1, but I can increase this to 2. So when I press generate, it's going to generate 2 images of a puppy with a red shirt. So while that's loading, let's continue on. Underneath this is an option for something called a seed. So this is a starting point for iterations. Any random number will do. DiffusionBee will pick 1 if left blank. You can find different seed numbers and different generations from images from examples of websites like civitai and more. You can always just enter a random number and see what that will get you. Underneath this is the sampling steps. As we mentioned before, sampling steps play a factor in high quality image generation. Step counts refer to the number of iterations a model goes through to refine the image. So when making an image, Stable Diffusion will generate visual noise, and your step counts is how many steps before the image goes from being noisy to something that's more clear, like what we see on the screen right now. And as mentioned previously, some samplers require less steps and some require more to generate an image that's clear. So the maximum number of images currently with DiffusionBee that you can start generating in a batch, again, think of it like a tray of cookies. How many are we going to make at one time? So there's a maximum of 2,000 images you can start as one batch of cookies if you wanted to. You can generate more in the queue. So let's run this again and you'll see another option pop up. So as I'm running this, it's just going to give me the number of images generated on the top here, how long it's going to take, and how many is still left in the queue. But while that's running, I can change this to a cat. And notice as I change this in the prompt window, the add to queue option is available now. So if I press that, above what's currently being run with the puppy prompt is now a prompt for the cat. Things I wish are included in DiffusionBee that currently aren't is a preview at the bottom of what's still to come. The images that are currently generated, if I hover over it, you'll see the prompt that was used to make the image and the base model that's used for that image itself as well. You'll also notice as I hover over the image, there's another little window that pops up that says Actions. If I click on that, a drop-down menu will be available. This gives me the option to save the image to my computer, which currently technically it is already saved, but within a hidden folder. But you can save it to somewhere you can find easily, like your desktop. Send to image, send to AI canvas, send to Inpainting, send to image with parameters, meaning all the parameters within this generation will also be sent there. That includes the seed number. Use parameters, copy all parameters, send to upscaler, or generate similar images. So now our queue is completed and it's back to being 0. So we have our 2 separate prompts and all unique seed numbers. I can tell this if I go to our history tab, which I can click on the button right here that has like a little rewind looking button with a clock. And now under the history tab, a detailed description of what was involved is here. So the seed number that was used to produce this image, the number of steps that was used, the guidance scale, which I'll get to in a moment, the image width, image height, so these were the resolution options that we chose, the sampler that was used, which I'll also get to in a moment, the model that was utilized, for this example was the default model, the mode that was used, so we're using text to image, if there was a Controlnet that was utilized, and if there was any style that was selected. We didn't use any negative prompts, so that portion is left blank. So let's click back to our text to image option here. So I can add to our description here. So a cat with a red shirt wearing headphones. You can also add different descriptors like a time of day, if it's indoors or outdoors, etc. In our negative box, we can add what we do not want to have in this image. And I'll show another example after this. Our new image is completed with a cat wearing headphones without it being a collared t-shirt or a white cat. So you can see negative prompting can drastically affect our image. Increasing the resolution will make our image quality look a little better, but also take longer to generate. So let's do this really quickly. Under the Actions tab, I'm going to click on Generate Similar Images. I'm going to stop this real quick. All I wanted was all the settings from that image to be put into these fields. Now we're going to increase the resolution of this image. So I'm going to increase this to around 704 on both my resolution for width and height. I'm going to lower the number of images just to 1. I'm going to keep all the settings how they were and press generate. By generating a similar image, it kept all the same parameters, but also because we increased the resolution, it should take a little longer than what the initial image was. Our image completed, although it didn't quite understand the task I was asking it to do, as it turned the entire cat red. Different factors can contribute to the overall image, whether it's the amount of step counts, the base model you're choosing from, the prompt if it's not more detailed, and too vague. So prompting, I can try to get rid of it being a red cat, but then it added a person, or it got rid of the person, but added another cat to it. So all these things play a different factor. So you want to keep working on your prompt to try to refine what you're looking for. For another example, I prompted a cute puppy playing with a yellow ball. I like the image, although I may not want it to be a grass background. So now in my negative prompt, I can add text, watermark, or grass, as I don't want any of those things to be within the image itself. So now the new image that's generated understands I don't want any text, I don't want any watermarks, and I don't want any grass. So I got rid of the grassy background and made it more like an asphalt ground. Weighting essentially tells StableDiffusion to focus on specific keywords, concepts, artists, styles, and mediums. You can do this in a variety of ways. Using parentheses can emphasize on specific words. Square brackets can diminish the attention of a specific word. In StableDiffusion, wrapping a word in multiple parentheses can boost the weight of it. Essentially, a word is enclosed in parentheses, the model emphasizes it more on its output. I'll link both of these articles that I found really helpful in making this video. As you can see on the screen from this cheat sheet, 1 parentheses increases the attention of a word by 1.1. 2 parentheses will increase the attention of the word by 1.20. 1 bracket will decrease it, and so on and so forth. So feel free to screenshot this or check out the article. And in the second article, it breaks down essentially what these words all mean in greater detail. Me being a visual learner myself, I figured this might be a little more helpful. I started off with a very simple prompt of an apple, banana, strawberry. Now, StableDiffusion doesn't understand what I want to focus on. It's just kind of giving me an array of different things. So I can fine tune exactly what I want to see on screen using different syntax. As mentioned, you can use brackets, numerical values, or plus or minus symbols to also add emphasis. Now, as I scroll up, you'll see the different words that I'm adding an emphasis to. For this example, I have plus symbols with the apple, the banana, and the strawberry. I wanted to test how these results changed in DiffusionBee. Being that DiffusionBee uses the same syntax as Automatic 1111, you're going to be using the brackets method, along with the numerical values. So as that cheat sheet showed, increasing the amount of brackets or parentheses will increase the attention or decrease the attention. Adding 3 parentheses around the strawberry added emphasis to the strawberries itself, so that's primarily what you see on the screen. Adding it around the banana added more emphasis to that. Adding it around the apple added emphasis to that. As mentioned, there's more than one way to kind of achieve this. So you can also add numerical values. As seen on screen, I have the parentheses, apple, 1, banana, 1, and strawberry set to 1.5. So there's more emphasis on the strawberry. So that's primarily what's taking over in this overall image. I did the same with the banana. So now that's the main thing you see on the screen. Same thing with the apple. Without adding a numerical value, the default is set to 1. You can also overdo it by having your value set too high, as seen on screen. So you can see the apple starting to look a little distorted now. Same thing with the banana, as well as the strawberry. As mentioned before, you can kind of push and pull how much emphasis you want on a specific word in your prompt. So changing the values of these different fruits, I can tell it to focus more on the strawberry versus anything else, or the banana, or the apple. So I have the apples set to 1, the banana and the strawberry set to 0.8. And I did the same for these other examples here. Using this method, you can fine-tune specifically things you want to see in your prompt. Not only that, you can combine different things. Following the example I saw in the article, I applied it to my own prompt. So I combined a koala and a turtle. And you can see, using the brackets and a numerical value, you can adjust how much influence one has over the other. As I increase or decrease the numbers, you'll see the influence changes quite a bit, some retaining the shape and color and even texture. As the numerical value changes, you'll see the influence on the image change overall. This is a fun way to kind of experiment and create some brand new ideas. If you're working on concept art, working on character design, or just trying to find a very unique reference image. This can be a very useful tool in your arsenal. Now you can see, without using parentheses, for the second prompt idea, I had a tiger with a turtle shell and a giraffe neck. So each one of these images aren't really consistent. It doesn't really know what I want to focus on. Now using parentheses, I can tell it what primarily I want to see in this image. So I'm using 2 parentheses around the turtle shell, 3 parentheses around the giraffe neck. So its primary focus will be on the giraffe neck itself, but you can also see the influence of the shell on the second image here. And again, playing around with the values, whether using brackets, parentheses, or numerical value, you can drastically change the image around. For the example you see now, I have more parentheses set around the turtle shell. So that's the primary word that StableDiffusion is focused on and will be more influential in the resulting image. And as stated in the article and previously in this conversation, if a word is influencing the image too strongly, you may want to use a lower value than 1 to reduce the strength of that in the overall prompt. So you can see that illustrated here with the tiger. I'm lowering the strength of the turtle shell and the giraffe neck. Now my resulting image just looks like a tiger. So for the following image, I added more emphasis on the giraffe neck and the turtle shell, primarily the giraffe neck. So now that's going to be dominating the overall result. Although you do see some texture from the turtle in the giraffe itself. You can also leverage this when you're creating images around items. So if you have products that you're trying to mock up and you really want to focus on something specific, you can utilize weights to do this. For this example, I'm emphasizing on the word glass. On the second example, I'm emphasizing on the word color. So the entire image will be blue. And as seen in the beginning of this video, without using weight around the dog and just water, the emphasis is specifically on the water itself. And now that DiffusionBee also is incorporating styles, you can influence what that looks like. Now, even though these 2 sets of images have the same numerical value, now using the new implementation of style in DiffusionBee, the resulting image is drastically different. And again, adding multiple brackets or parentheses can either add emphasis or take away emphasis on specific parts. So you can leverage this along with negative prompting, as we did previously, to really fine-tune the end image. And a reminder, there are multiple ways you can leverage weights: numerical values, parentheses, or brackets. So using a combination, I really was able to emphasize the dog made of water, and not just the water itself. The way you text, the base model you use, the resolution you choose, and the step counts all factor in the overall image. So keep working on it if your image doesn't quite look the way you want it to be. Understand this isn't the final result. An example that you see on the screen currently is the beginnings of an image of a character I was designing, although it didn't quite look as well as I'd like it to look. Throwing it through different processes within DiffusionBee not only can increase the detail, but the sharpness and clarity of the overall image, as you see on the right. So don't get discouraged if your image doesn't look that great initially. As we keep navigating down, we have an option that says Styles. Under here, you can choose from different styles available. So with the same prompt of a cute puppy playing with a yellow ball and switching between the different styles available, it can vastly change the overall look of our image, everything from vector art to 3D art and more. Using the generate similar option, we can also get a variety from an image that we may like. So I like the image of the puppy playing with the ball here, and I wanted to generate similar looking images to that, and I was able to do so. So using the same prompt and everything, same seed number, same step count, all I did was change the generate similar option, and it gave us a modification seed number, meaning the small changes within that initial base image it's going to generate similar looking images from. So for this example, I'll change this from puppy to a cat. So this is the image we get with no style selected and no additional information added to it. The resolution is pretty low and it's a pretty simple prompt. But we can choose from these styles by scrolling through whichever ones we like. I'm going to choose logo design and click it once. Now you'll see it's highlighted with this little blue box, meaning that it's active. So when I press generate, even though we have the exact same settings, same seed number, and sampling steps, we'll get an entirely different look on the output. Now the image is complete with more of a logo design look versus the real life looking version of a cat. So play around with the prompts that you make with the different art styles and see what you can generate. I just wanted to quickly say, regardless of whatever base model you choose will be affected by that style selection. So you currently see the FLUX Schnell model because it's already extremely accurate with text and hands. That carries over to the style that you're selecting. So because again, the base model is really acute to what you're prompting, it also helps and is extremely beneficial when you're selecting these styles. So keep that in mind. So whether you're using Controlnet XL, some epic realism, or whatever base you're using, the style will kind of overpower that overall look and give it its look. So again, it's really helpful when I'm using Schnell, for instance, because the text accuracy is still there regardless of what style I chose. So try to use this for your own workflow. Again, if you're creating like comics, if you're creating art for like art books or whatever you may be doing, experiment with the different models and bases because you can really get some really fun, unique things with this. But yeah, I just wanted to show you really quickly that the power of using the Flux model with styles is amazing. As we scroll down under this other drop-down tab, we see Diffusion. If we click on this little drop-down arrow, it opens up another window. From here, we can select the different samplers. And again, if you forget what these do, you can hover over the little eye and it will show you a brief explanation of what these do. The sampling algorithm used by DiffusionBee. So the options we have available are the KARRAS, DDIM, which I've mentioned in the description, that requires a higher step count of around 40 to start generating a decent looking image, LMSD, ENDM, the K-Euler Ancestral, and K-Euler model. I tend to either use the K-Euler Ancestral for very fast generations at a relatively low step count, DDIM, or the KARRAS personally, but use what sampler works best for your workflow. Underneath this, you have your step count, which has a maximum of 75 steps. But again, after a certain point, some samplers won't really make a big difference if you increase the step count. Like Euler Ancestral, increasing the step count doesn't necessarily yield better results versus DDIM, increasing the step count to around like 60, you can get a little bit more detail out of that sampler. Underneath that is a guidance scale slider. So the more you slide it to the left, the more creativity it has, but it doesn't necessarily follow your prompt as accurately. Moving it to the right will follow your prompt more, but doesn't necessarily give it the flexibility to make something really unique. If we hover over the eye, it says how closely you follow your prompt. Lower numbers give the AI more creativity. So finding a decent balance will also factor in the end result for your image there. I tend to leave mine by default around 7 or around 9, and I just kind of leave it right there. It tends to be the sweet spot for my workflow. So if we hover over the eye, again it says the starting point for iterations, any random number will do. DiffusionBee will pick 1 if left blank. Underneath that, we have a small modification seed number. If you want to do small variations to images, So the example I gave before, so although this was the starting seed number, the 986324, with the modification seed number selected, it'll take this image as its base and keep making small variations to that image. So it kept that same overall shape, form, position of the dog, but changed the dog's color, and where the head placement was, it kind of changed it, like it just makes small modifications to it. So you can use this to generate different variations of a character if you're working on one. Underneath the small modification seed number, you have the option for compatibility mode. If selected, it will behave similar to other tools like Automatic 1111. I personally don't usually have this toggled on, and there's probably more in-depth explanation on the Discord, but yeah, I think you can get most of the usage out of this application without having it toggled on personally. Under the compatibility mode, we have the option for Controlnet. From there is a drop-down menu where we can select depth, Bodypose, Scribble, Lineart, or Tile. I'm going to choose the depth option. You can import an image from your desktop or wherever you have it stored. So I'm going to choose this image of a porcupine wearing a t-shirt that says free hugs. I slightly modified the prompt to a cute cat holding a yellow ball. Underneath the image, we have the option to generate from the Controlnet. If I hover over this little eye drop down, it shows if you select no, you have to input a raw Controlnet image. I don't have one as a guide, so I'm going to make one from this image itself. Underneath this is the option to select how much of the influence of this image will have on our generated image. So if I hover over the strength of the Controlnet input, for most cases, leave it at 1. 1.0 is essentially having the influence of this at 100%. If I have it at 0.5, think of that having it as the influence of this image on my prompt of around 50%. If I have it at 0.2, think of it as having this influence my overall prompt around 20%. So I tend to have mine around 0.4 to start. But again, it really depends on what your need is for this image. So I'm going to press generate and we'll see what this turns out to look like. In the background, what DiffusionBee did, and which will save my image to the desktop, is a depth map now from this image as its guide. So it looked at the bright parts of the image and the dark parts of the image and pulled a depth map from it itself. So now our image is completed. If we look at our depth map, we can see the overall form from the porcupine. This was initially from the elbows. Our new image used that for around where the cat's paws are. As I have more influence from the image at 0.8, it starts taking more of the shape of the head from where the porcupine was. So the back is starting to change, the overall shape of the shoulders from this cat is starting to change. And at 1%, so the complete influence from the shape of that porcupine, now we can really see with the outline of this porcupine has heavily influenced the shape of our cat. So now let's do the same thing with changing from depth map to Bodypose and press generate. So this is what it generates from using the Bodypose Controlnet. It looks at the image of the porcupine and it uses it as a reference. So now this is where the head is registering. This is where the shoulders are registering. And it tried to figure out where the hands and feet are based off of this image. So now we see from our body pose, it no longer looks at the shape of our image like the depth map did, but what positioning the body was in as our reference, as the guide. So again, the depth map looked at the overall shape of what was happening. The body pose looks at the positioning of what the limbs and body parts are in this image, and that's what influences our image. We can move on again and go into line art mode and hit generate. And in a few seconds, the image generates a line art image from our guide. So it looks at the porcupine, it extracted what the overall shape and form look like based off a line art image Controlnet model, and we'll use that to influence our image of our cat holding a yellow ball. So it took the shape of the hands, the feet, it even included the t-shirt, and kept the face as a cat. But the little quills in the porcupine, it interpreted as fur for the cat. Although it didn't quite give us a yellow ball, it made the t-shirt yellow. So here's where you would have to modify what the prompt was to really narrow down what you're trying to get in the overall image. If we go over to DiffusionBee.com, we can see another example of what the Controlnet images can do. So from a Lineart image, you can go from a detailed Lineart image of an owl into something fully rendered and colored of an owl. Another example from the Discord itself is another Lineart illustration of a bumblebee into a fully rendered illustration of a bumblebee. Our next Controlnet model will be Scribble. From here, you can take an illustration and vastly modify it, either colorizing it or turning it into something brand new entirely. I'm going to make this into a colorized illustration. So I took an image of a fox. I have the input strength at 1 or 100%. Under my prompt, I'm going to say a detailed illustration of a fox wizard. I'm going to increase the resolution of this as well. I'm going to turn this up to around 768 by 768. I will also increase the step count slightly to around 30 and then press generate. For this, because it will look at this illustration as our guide with Scribble mode, you want to make sure you have your automatically generate control set to no. So it's looking at this as our guide and not generating one from scratch like we needed for both Bodypose and depth. So remember, for Scribble as well as tile mode, they'll have this automatic generate control set to no. And now I'm going to press generate. If you don't, you'll get this error code. So just as before, now in our queue, we see how fast the image is being generated, the ETA time remaining for the image, and how many images total are being generated. So our images have completed here. So just to kind of quickly say some use cases, I used Lineart to colorize this image, taking the illustration on the left and turning it into a fully rendered illustration on the right. And then using Scribble, if you have a really rough drawing, think of like a children's drawing of a house or something, you can turn it into something more complex and abstract like this. So you can really get some really unique renders using these different line Scribble, Bodypose, or depth options. I have a few more points to make about this, but first let's cover tile mode really quickly. Tile mode is used to increase the clarity of an image. How I use it is I would generate an image similar to what we see here with this fox, save it to my desktop, and then just like how we did before, instead of going to generate similar images, I'm going to send it to image with parameters. This keeps all the settings that were used to generate this image. Scrolling down, we're kind of familiar with what some of these tabs use from using the text to image option, but now in image to image, we can use this image as our guide. So I'm going to drag and drop our fox into the Controlnet option here. And I'm going to set our importance or influence to 0.4. So this is saying how much of this is going to influence our overall image. I'm going to switch this to tile mode. And again, I'm going to have this toggled off for automatically generate control because we're using this as our guide. So again, ones that you don't need to have that toggled on for are tile mode and Scribble. I'm going to increase the resolution to the max of 1024 by 1024 and also increase the step count to around 40. So I'm going to press generate, and now we'll see an upscaled version that's larger in size and higher quality resolution in the image, with more details added with tile mode. While that's loading, let's look at another example here that I used for Betty White. On the right, we see the image that was generated just using the embeddings, which already improved the quality of her face, although the skin texture needed a little bit more work, as well as some details on her jacket that were kind of missing. So using the method I just showed with tile mode, it increased the resolution of her face and adding a few more details to the skin. Also, now it added buttons to the jacket as were missing in the original image. Still, there are some issues with the fingers as well as the text, but again, there are ways that we can improve this. But these are known issues that happen with StableDiffusion. It also increased the clarity in the necklace and jewelry, so the chain looks a little bit more sharp and more details added, as well as the earrings. Our image is completed on the right. The original would be on the left. Now, although it did add some more details to the jacket and some to the pouches, Notice it's missing some things that we wanted from the original, like the hat. So to kind of fix this, we'd have to play around with the influence of the original image. So going back down under the Controlnet options, we'd have to increase the importance of the original image. I'd play around with anywhere from around 7 or 8. This will tell StableDiffusion, I want more of the influence of this image to be in the end result, as well as increasing the quality of our image. While that's loading, let's look at another example. Creating the image using the new Flux model, which I'll get to shortly, we were able to create a high resolution image of a dog, although it could be sharpened up a bit more. Initially running it through the method that we just learned with tile mode, it did bring up the resolution, but now our text was affected. So to rectify that, we use the same method I just showed you. By doing so, you can see in the small thumbnail on the left, the text is now fixed to what it's supposed to be, and we still keep a good increase in quality. So now we can see the changed image on the right here has increased quality in the clarity in the eyes, the paws, and the fur, as well as the grass. It kept the clarity in the text and readability while retaining what we were going for, compared to the original image on the left here, which still looked good, but was a little fuzzy. Now our image is completed on the right side. So it's retained the overall look and shape of the original image with the face positioning overall. It gave us back the hat that we were going for, but it also increased the clarity in the fur and the ears. But we noticed that there's still some issues with the hat and some with the hands. But overall, it's given us a little bit more detail in the robe that was missing before, like the buttons and the pouches, compared to what we had previously. Although it did give us more detail in different parts, it kind of lost the overall shape and form that we were going for. So again, a lot of this is experimentation, playing around with the influence of an image and how much weighting is being influenced by the guide. Now going back to our text to image tab, there's another drop-down menu that says LoRa. So as I explained before early in the video, a LoRa, think of it like a compressed, truncated version of a large model. These could be focused to influence different things like detail, hair, particular art styles, etc. So there are a lot of LoRa that are available online, a ton that you can get from civitai, many that I've made myself that are available on civitai. To find if they're compatible, again, go to filters, make sure that you have checkpoints, embeddings, and LoRa toggled on. And then the ones that are compatible with DiffusionBee would be StableDiffusion 1.4 all the way to StableDiffusion 2.1. Everything beyond this currently is not available to use within DiffusionBee. The beauty of having a LoRa file is not only is it small in file size, but you can layer these up. So again, there's LoRa that is particularly fine-tuned to add detail, like the Add Detail LoRa, or as the name says, More Detail LoRa, which add what it says, more detail to fur textures and clothing. You also have ones that influence art styles like Jim Lee. So if you wanted to, you can mix and match how much of these you want to influence in the overall image. Think of it like making food, adding a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Too much of one or the other can ruin the dish, and just a little bit of each can actually influence the overall flavor of that dish. So playing around with the proper balance can heavily influence the overall end image you're going for. I'll run this one more time so you can kind of see what this looks like with a little bit of LoRa influence on the image. Our image is now completed, so here's a reminder of what the old version looked like. So we went from our black and white Lineart illustration to fully colorizing it and giving it a good amount of detail. From there, I now added the additional LoRa from adding detail and a bit of the Jim Lee LoRa. Keep note, some of the LoRa, just like the embeddings, require a trigger word for it to function. This is a word that should be found in the description of wherever you found your model, and I'll show the example here. Like the embedding I use for Betty White, we'll have it under the trigger words option. So this means for you to be able to utilize this LoRa for it to be fully functional, you need to have this word within your prompt for it to act. So for the detailed one, this doesn't necessarily require a trigger word for it to function, but the Jim Lee one does. So I did not add the word Jim Lee in my prompt. So the influence of the Jim Lee LoRa would not be active although it has improved the quality using the add detail LoRa. So the image on the left is our image without the detail LoRa, and the image on the right is with the detail LoRa active. So you can see there's more detail added to the hat, as well as to the furry tail, and to the robe. There's more detail in the line work, more detail in the pouches, as well as the hands. It overall improved the quality of the detail of the image. So if I navigate to where the Jim Lee LoRa is located, I can see the trigger word for this would be Jim Lee. So if I copy that and go back into my prompt, and now regenerate the same image with that prompt, it should change it slightly. All these small things factor into the end result of your image. So from the prompts, your negative prompts, how much of the influence from these sliders you're adding, how much of the influence of the importance, all factor in the end result. Now our brand new image is finished generating. Because we now added the trigger for Jim Lee, that LoRa is also now active. Now you'll notice the difference between the LoRa on the left, which only had the detail added, which did modify and add details to the hat, to the Jim Lee modified version that's also blended in with it. It added more contrast, as well as adding a more detailed background. It made the cape more vibrant in color as well, and added a little bit more contrast around the bottom of the neck and the eyes. I think this looks fantastic and improved the original image significantly. As a reminder, here was the original image that we were working with the fox, that had no added detail or LoRa's added to it at all. And again, this all stemmed from our black and white image Lineart illustration. You can do some fantastic things using simply the Controlnet models within DiffusionBee and some illustrations. Let's go back to our home screen. The last little section here is the miscellaneous portion. If you select that, it'll show you two different options you can toggle on, V Prediction and Clip Skip 2. If I hover over the information tabs, if you should use V Prediction, mostly used in StableDiffusion 2, 768 models. Underneath that, it also says for Clip Skip 2, if you want to set Clip Skip 2 as 2. So when will you need these? If you go under where you download your models, some state that they need these things activated. Similar to how some LoRa needed trigger words, some models need V Prediction or Clip Skip 2 to be active. If you don't see it within that description, likely they don't need that to be on. Let's go back to our home screen. Next up, we have image to image. As the thumbnail kind of illustrates here, we can take one of our basic illustrations, just like how I mentioned with like a children's sketch, and you can turn it to something extremely detailed. So we actually used something similar when we used this for our fox illustration here. What it does is kind of how Controlnet models work. It uses one image as a guide to create something brand new. If I go into my history tab, I've done an example with this with Betty White. So using the embeddings and the prompt Betty White on an airplane, I generated an image of Betty White sitting on a plane. From there, I was able to use that image as a guide to create something brand new. Under my history tab, we can see I prompted a woman sitting on a bus, which did create a woman sitting on a bus, but I wanted to change the overall positioning of the body and look. So I used the Betty White image that we made earlier, this one that we had with the aid of embeddings, and used that as my guide. Setting the influence of this too high played too heavy of a factor of the end result, and you can see the Controlnet importance number here, and that can also be located under our images that we use under here. When I lowered the importance of the Controlnet, we still kept the overall shape and body pose, but it did allow a little bit more creative freedom. So we get a slightly different version of a lady sitting on the bus, while still maintaining the overall shape and pose of Betty White. When I lowered the importance even further, we started to lose the likeness of Betty White and still kept the overall shape a little bit, but again, we didn't quite retain as much as we did before. So again, 0.5 or 50%, and this is 0.2 or 20%. So playing around with that can really influence the overall end result. Let's navigate back to the home screen. So image to image looks really similar to text to image, but now we have that window at the very top. This is where we can input an image to modify the rest of our creation. Think of it as our initial overall guide to the end result we want. So we have our image that we drop in here. We have our text window where we can prompt here, our negative text window where we can tell StableDiffusion what not to include, the option to choose a base model. Then here we have a sliders to say how much of this influence of this initial base image we want to play a factor in. So we can play around with this. And as it says, if we hover over, how closely to stick to the input image. Lower numbers makes the AI do more changes. So if we have it set to the left, it'll change it a lot more. If we have it set to the right, it changes it a lot less. So I tend to keep this around 20 something, like in the 20s, usually around 26 to around 30%. Honestly, it's a decent amount of influence from this. And then just like we saw before, we have the resolution options we can choose from. We have the number of images we can choose from, the seed number, which we can add or let StableDiffusion generate a random one, the number of sampling steps we can change, or, leave it fairly low depending on the model you're using. Styles, which we can choose from, which we talked about before. Underneath that, the samplers we can choose, steps we can choose, the guidance scale, which again is how much freedom now it will follow our prompt. So the first one is the input strength, and that's relative to the image. How much of the image is going to be playing a factor. Then the guidance scale is how much is it going to be following our prompt. Underneath that, again, we have our seed number, option for an Inpainting options. If you toggle that down, it says smoothen mask. This will make the masked image smoother. So when the image to image, you can actually paint in that thumbnail area, and when you have that toggled on, it will smooth out the mask that you just painted. Controlnet, which we kind of covered before, gave you different models, the depth, Bodypose, Scribble, Lineart, and Tile. And again, I showed you Tile you can use to increase the not only size of your image, but the resolution of the image at the same time. Underneath that, we have the automatically generate control. Again, you would have that toggled on if you're using depth, Bodypose, or Lineart, and you would have it toggled off if you're using Scribble or Tile mode. Then you have the Controlnet importance, how much of our second image now is playing a factor. So if I wanted to, I can have our Flux as our guide. I can use Betty White as our Controlnet image, and we can have this as Bodypose. So now it's going to look at the first image for the reference image and the second image as the pose of the body. And I can say, how much of this do I want to influence? I'll keep it at 1. I'll generate an image, say yes. And let's hit generate. And I have my resolution. Actually, let me stop that real quick because the resolution is set really high. So I'll lower this down just to 12 so we can generate a few really quickly. And I'll actually lower the sampling steps to like 18, press generate. So what this is now going to do, again, it's going to look at my Flux character as the guide. It's going to look at the Betty White as the body pose and give us something brand new. Okay, so I finished generating a few different images here, just kind of showing the different amounts of change you can make with the same starting image, just playing around with the influence of your Controlnet. So I took Betty White there and playing around with different line art and depth models, you can recreate that and make it look vastly different. So these are influenced by her sitting on the chair, obviously. Using the line art, again, it traces all the shapes within the image, so I start to get like features of her face and hair and all that. Using the depth map, again, looks at the bright and dark parts of an image, so it doesn't necessarily look at specific features, just the bright and dark parts, so then I kind of get more control over or less influence of the face, I should say, with that method. And then you can kind of swap it out with different things if you want to see how your character looks in different poses. I say look at I just loaded up an image of like a dancer or something, or you can find different images online and kind of really create some fun different unique images from a base model. As the name says, you're looking at an image and you're turning it from one image to another, like with Betty White with like a little fox person. So anyway, let's go back to the home screen. So back in the home screen, you also have the option for AI Canvas. Again, you can navigate two different ways to most things here, either clicking the open button or scrolling down the left here and clicking it that way. And I went to AI Canvas. So from here, you can either paint within here and create like a little scribble and take it to that scribble mode if I wanted to. So let's just scribble a really rough person. And I will save this out. Let's save this to my desktop. Oh, before I dive into the AI canvas, I feel I should kind of do one more example here for Scribble, because I don't feel like I covered that well enough, but like I can keep the same illustration of a fox wizard, and I will lower down the resolution just so this is a little quicker. And then I will kind of keep everything else pretty much as is as far as the LoRa added. But I want to show you what the Scribble mode can do when I use that. So I'm going to have this toggled off and then press generate. So again, what it's going to do is look at my illustration, and it's going to try to generate something really fun from this. So let's see what it can do. So again, just another quick example as it's generating the last one here. Just took a really terrible line art drawing and threw it in here. Playing around with the influence will definitely factor in this, but you can see where it kind of pulled some information from this image, like the little dots that were on that. The overall form of this little tail looks like the little leg here. Straight, like I can see where it started pulling different pieces, like this little part that kind of pokes out here, like the end of the little face. But yeah, there's little dots and stuff in the background. I'm like, okay, I see where it got that from. But let's see what this last one looks like. That was with the Scribble mode. This is with the Lineart again. And again, it looks like the shape and form of your image, and then pulls from that to make its illustration. So almost done here. All right, so now from Lineart, again, it looks at the shape of the thing, and it made some really wild looking fox here, but you get the idea. You can take a really terrible illustration and start to make it look like something. In AI Canvas, it's similar to how we saw in the other windows, where we have a prompting box at the top. We have a negative prompting box underneath that. We have an option to select a base model, but notice now we don't have the option to select the dimensions of the image, as this is a box that we can keep expanding on. There's no set parameter to the actual size of this thing. You do have control over the number of steps and the seed, which you should be kind of familiar with now. Underneath that, we have an option that says function. So this is probably the main thing that you're going to be kind of, it'll play the heavier influence of what you're trying to do here, as we have the option to select generative fill. If you're familiar with Photoshop, similar to that, where anything within inside of this bounding box, it's what's going to be affected. Or you can change it to image or text to image. These all will kind of slightly change how this box functions. Underneath this, we have styles, like we mentioned before. We can actually layer this up. So now we have the option, just like we do with text to image and image to image, we can influence the style on top of our prompt. Under the diffusion option, we can choose what sampler we want to use, just like we did before, seed number, and the Inpainting options. So over this little eye droplet here, it says this will forcefully only update the transparent / masked region. So in theory, if I were to hit generate, it will only influence whatever I have masked. And that brings me to the top option here. So on the very top bar, we have a move box option. This will move our little bounding box. So within again, this bounding box is where all the little magic happens. Not really, but this is where we can affect what we do when we prompt stuff. You have a move canvas option, which, as the name says, it moves the whole canvas around. So if you have a very large image you're working on, you can kind of scoot this around and refocus on the area you're working on. You have a draw Inpainting mask, which I can select a certain area, and again prompt to either inpaint, to do a generative fill, or a regular old text to image. Next to that, you have an erase button where I can delete parts of an image I don't want, and if I want it, bring that little bounding box back over and try to reprompt to fix that section, I could do that. You have a paintbrush option, which I used to create that really rough. If I go back to the image to image here, where is it? This little noodly looking thing. It's where I actually created that within the AI canvas. Then you have your add image, which what I did here is where I imported the DiffusionBee image, and you have your saved save canvas. So it'll save whatever I created here on my desktop or wherever I want to save it to. You have your undo button, which, as the name says, it undoes what you did. And then you have the clear stage option, which will erase everything off of your stage and you start fresh. So I can prompt, a bright sun and hit generate. And again, depending on your sampling steps, it's going to take a little minute to generate. I should also mention here is it does not have the option to choose the Flux models, which are the new models within the AI canvas, at least with this current version upon this release of this video. So just keep that in mind. You're still limited to some of the older models and not the brand new Flux one within the AI canvas option. So now it gave me that. And if I wanted to, I'm gonna select a little area there. Oops, let me undo. I'm gonna mask this area here actually. And I'm gonna put birds flying. Oops. And now I'm gonna set this to generative fill. I'll leave that as is and I'll press generate. And this isn't as accurate as you would be doing in like another platform like Photoshop or something, but from here, as I kind of demonstrated before, you can send it to image or the text to image with the Controlnet option and turn it into something brand new. So it's pretty powerful. So right there, it didn't quite give me anything I wanted there, so I would just hit retry and keep doing that a few different times until it gives me what I want. And you can kind of create some fun collages of images and stuff. If I go back to my little history here, so I took the image of the bee and then the flowers, and I prompted it to create a monster. So it created this weird little form based off of my little bumblebee looking background. So again, here was the reference image it looked at, and then was able to create that. Again, this was using the AI canvas. I was able to kind of expand out the image of the bee in the little sunflower field, and then using the I think this was image to image. And if you ever forget which thing you're using, under your history tab, it'll tell you. Yeah, so under the Controlnet, it shows me I used Lineart to generate this little new monster from that previous image. But anyway, so yeah, AI canvas. Again, you might have to do this a few different times for it to actually get what you want, because it didn't quite give me the birds I was asking for, so I'd have to run it a few times. I personally don't use this section too often, just to be completely transparent, but it is an option for you if you want to generate something from scratch and kind of modify little areas of it and kind of paint away or add to different things. But I'm going to move along back to the home screen. So back in the home screen here, we have Illusion Generator. So I'll click on this, and as the thumbnail shows, you can create different images within DiffusionBee based off of an input, what they call input illusion. So you can do this with anything. So these are pre-made little patterns here, but you can actually load your own. So I did that. So this is from the little checkerboard one, and I just prompted like a futuristic city. But you can also input your own images. So again, this was like the demo one they had there. So in DiffusionBee, I prompted a black and white image of a penguin, and I just used the Flux model, which I'll get to in a little bit here. I know you guys are waiting, but yeah, so I generated a black and white image of a penguin and then used that as my guide for the illusion generator and input that. And it, similar to kind of how you do with image to image, it uses things as references. It did the same thing with the penguin. So I looked at my penguin image, and I had prompted a, what was the prompt here if I hover over it? A beautiful field of flowers. So I used the penguin as the reference guide, and again, looks at the black and white portions of the image, and then turned it into a little field of flowers. So you can rerun it a few different times until you get what you want. Also within here, again, as you should be a pro at this by now, there's a prompt window, a negative prompt window, and under that is the illusion strength. So think of it like how we had under the other Controlnet section, where you have the Controlnet importance. It's pretty much the same as what this illusion strength does. So if you have it to the left, Let me clear this out actually, so I can kind of see what's happening here. Reset default. Yeah, so if I have it to the left, it's not as much of this influence of whatever the shape is that I'm having here. For my example was that penguin. So if I have it to the right, it's going to heavily influence the overall look of my image there. So to the left, less of the influence. To the right, more of the influence. So underneath that is where you can choose your base model. And underneath that, you have the amount of images you want to generate, then the seed number, and you can also select styles within this menu too, like we did before. See how that changed where I can actually drag and drop an image here. So I re-imported my picture of my penguin and then changed the prompt to a small Italian village. I increased the illusion strength, and you have this advanced options toggle, which just gives you the option to negative prompt things. I'm going to leave that blank for now. And then I'm going to set the default model as the default model. And I'll have maybe 3 images here. I'm going to set the sampling steps pretty low. And then I'll have my sampler set to the K Euler ancestral. And I will hit generate. Actually, I'm probably going to add a LoRa to this. I'll add detail LoRa and then hit generate. So now it's going to generate 3 different images using the penguin as the guide and try to create a small Italian village. And again, you can layer up your LoRa. So if you have different ones for specific things, those can play a heavy factor. So this is a great tool, not only just for creating fun things like this, but if you're creating a logo for a company or creating some kind of promotional branding for an event. Let's say examples you saw online that were trending a while ago were people making really creative QR codes that were functional and looked like images, like really fun things. Like the Nike logo was like an island. They had like the Adidas logo as something. The Twitter logo, all are like really creative, fun things. You can do this too in like the examples they have for like QR codes and different things too. But yeah, just for again, creatives, if you're just trying to create some fun images, have fun with that. But if you're using it for like businesses and corporate uses, it's, you know, fantastic when you're creating promotional materials with like a previously made logo or image. You can kind of revamp those into brand new promotional things or functional QR codes. So if you it created the penguin here, the fun thing with this is even though it looks like just a kind of random collection of buildings and like some foliage, if you were to squint your eyes now, so go ahead and take a minute to kind of squint, you will now see the shape of the penguin is now within this Italian village. So you can really create some fun, like subliminal looking messages and images like this. Same thing with this. So it looks like a nice, fun little town and buildings and nothing too crazy about it. But again, if you squint, then you see the image of the penguin. So it's like a fun little hidden image within an image. So again, this could be used for promotional materials. It could be used for just having fun with these different images. But try to find creative ways to use this. If you have a QR code for your website or something you're trying to promote, make it into some really fun thing like this. So it doesn't just look like a generic basic thing, you know, make it really fun and unique for people to see. But while this last one loads, again, just looks like a random assortment of buildings and foliage. But again, if you squint, then you should be able to see the penguin in each one of these images. Here were a few more quick examples utilizing the text in DiffusionBee. So I just prompted a black flag with the words hello. And again, same kind of concept. I prompted a beautiful Italian village. And if you squint again, you can kind of make out the words hello. You might have to run this a few times to get something that looks like what you're going for. Did the same thing with a cozy log cabin and then also a cute snow town. I could probably keep tweaking this to get better results, but you can basically get the idea from this of how text could look. So we kind of covered, you're starting to see the pattern here, how some of this stuff functions. So next up is Inpainting. So again, we can either click it here or on the left side here or navigation little screen. We can click it either way, it brings you to the same thing. So here's an example I did of a little porcupine guy with a t-shirt that says free hugs. And the original was just him with no glasses on. So if I do the undo, you'll see his little face here. And if I redo, you'll see the little glasses. Even though it kind of covered his nose, it's fine. One thing to note is when you're using Inpainting, sometimes the overall quality of the image goes down a bit. And this has been discussed in the Discord and covered in the FAQ page. So you'll actually notice if you kind of like focus around where the glasses are, it's actually not as sharp as the rest of the images itself. And then kind of focus like where his little eyebrow line is. And if I do redo, see the quality has gone down a little bit, right? So you might have to do a little bit of post editing, either using DiffusionBee or Photoshop. But if you can't afford Photoshop, there's free versions online like Photop, which essentially is Photoshop, but it runs on a web browser for free. And you'd have to do a little bit of masking, so you probably like bring back some of the original image so it doesn't look so vastly different of quality loss there. Or like I said not too long ago, you can send it to image using the tile technique there and increase the quality to boost it back up. But yeah, so you can inpaint in DiffusionBee. I should kind of cover what this on here says, but you should be kind of familiar with this now. So you have your prompting window, you have your negative prompting window, the things you don't want to see. You have your model selection option, seed number, sampling steps, styles, and under diffusion, you have your sampler options. Under that, steps. Under that, your guidance scale of how much of it's being influenced, as it says, how closely it follows your prompt, or how much the AI can do its own thing. Your inpainting options have this little option to toggle on and off of only generating whatever is masked. So you have your stroke size slider, which I wish they had a preview, which they don't, but it allows you to either make this little thing smaller or bigger. But when I have that selected, I can adjust the size. And then when you have the only update masked selected here, honestly, I feel like I have more results with this, but like with this toggled on here, if I were to generate something, it's only going to change within this mask versus the entirety of the image. It's supposed to do the same thing with AI Canvas, but again, for my own personal use cases, I haven't gotten it to do what I want it to do as much as I have with Inpainting when it comes to this particular kind of masking. So AI Canvas for me, great when I want to expand the canvas out using that bounding box and prompting stuff. But when it comes to, fine tuning a specific small part, Inpainting for me personally tends to work more accurately when I'm selecting it. Also, when I am using this to draw, say I wanted to give him a little hat, I notice if you actually kind of draw beyond what you're trying to do. So say I wanted to give him like a little Abe Lincoln looking hat here, I would actually make it a little larger than I had intended to. And it tends to give me more accurate results to what I was trying to do. Again, for my own personal use, yours might be a little different. You might get different results. But yeah, so the rest of this layout you should be kind of familiar with now with the drop down menu for LoRa options. If I reset to the exact default, you kind of know what this is. Import your prompt input and so on and so forth. Yeah, so if you're happy with what you generate, you can save it to your desktop or wherever you want to save it to. You can open an image to work from under either text to image or image to image or your history tab. You can actually send stuff to image as well. So if I wanted to, I can go under actions and then send this to the Inpainting, and it will do the same thing. So then from here, I can select what I want and prompt and add stuff. So there's numerous ways to access the same kind of windows. And I think that's like the beauty and power of this app is it's so sleek and simplistic. It's pretty easy to navigate and get around here versus other ones could be a little overwhelming. So, but yeah, that's Inpainting in a nutshell. And another example they have is you can remove items. More Inpainting examples. I just prompted a corgi on a park bench to get the initial image, and then I want to remove the dog. So then in Inpainting, with the brush size relatively large, I selected the corgi and just put park bench. So then when I tried the first time, it got rid of the dog, but still had like a person in the background. So then I selected the person and the arms and hands and stuff again. And then when I reran it, it got rid of most of that. So you can remove stuff, but you do see a little bit of artifacts here and there. So just keep that in mind. But you can take this image and then throw it into the image to image to increase the quality like I showed you before, and it will probably fix most of this issue here. So upscaler, as it says, it will increase the resolution of the image, it will increase the size of it. So I had the example of the porcupine again. So by default, just throwing it through this upscaler will only make it larger. It won't add details or make it sharper. It will literally make it a larger image using the real sRGAN upscaler. And there again, DiffusionBee has only this one as an option, but there are many available and other tools that you can use to upscale if you don't want to use that locally within DiffusionBee. But the upscaler will only increase the size. So what I did, for instance, with this image is I threw it through the image to image, either through actions or the history tab, and sent the image to image with parameters, and then again increasing the resolution to the max. So in this case, it's 1024 by 1024. And depending on what sampler you're using, increasing the sample steps. I like using the ancestral one. So for me, I get, it's not diminishing returns, but it doesn't really make much of a change after a certain point. So I've noticed like around 40 to maybe 50. That's about as max as you really need to get with this, because you're not really going to get too many more details out of it. Doing anything higher, 40 is already pretty much pushing it though. So I'll keep it around 40. And then under the Controlnet model, you'll use the exact same image that you just used. So again, save it to your desktop first, then send it to image with parameters. And then under here, you're copying it back into here. And then you're switching this to tile mode, and then setting this importance Controlnet importance to about 0.4, which correlates to about 40%. And then you're gonna have this set to no. And then when you hit generate, you'll get a higher quality image that's larger in size and good quality. So from doing it like that, I went from an image that looked like this to an image like this, because it increased the size of it and then added more details to it. So if I move this to the left here, so it made it sharper. So the quills look like they're more in detail. The fur looks a lot more detailed. The eyes look a lot more detailed. The nose, it did change the mouth around a little bit. And the texture of the shirt changed a little bit there too, which I'm okay with though. But it just made the quality of the image a lot more crisp overall. And then I would take this image and then throw it back in here if you wanted to. But I personally use an external application. There's a few available. There's some that are free, one being upscayle. So upscayle is another app I use alongside DiffusionBee to increase the size of an image. It can also like kind of sharpen and smooth out things too. And there's a lot more models available to choose from. So this is like the default that comes with DiffusionBee. But as you can see, there's a lot more options there. There's ones that are specifically tuned for like digital art. There's stuff that's meant for like anime, and some are really quick, like the anime one, for instance. I'll just choose that. And this will increase your size larger than what you can max out in DiffusionBee by quite a bit there. So if I were to run this in real time and I hit upscale, and it's done in like seconds. So it made it larger, a little more sharp. It didn't add more details, it just kind of smoothed out some stuff. So you'll notice it looks a little, the fur details kind of lost in the hands, but again, it's kind of a give and take with this particular app and this particular model that they're using to upscale stuff. But there's different ones here. But this isn't a video on this app. I just wanted to show you an option to upscale. There's other ones out there too, some that aren't free that can be kind of pricey, like Topaz Gigapixel is another AI tool to upscale images. And again, there's free ones you can find online and that you can run directly off of like Hugging Face and stuff. So I will look around and I'll link some if I can find some in this video too. But they are wonderful for upscaling your images if you need them to be larger. But yeah, anyway, so the upscaler in DiffusionBee, it's not bad. It's just, I wish there were more options, but you can increase your image resolution and make it larger. We've already covered the models tab. So under the history tab, I should probably mention, not only does it show you like all the, the seed and guidance steps used and the width and sampler, but you'll notice also it shows you what mode was used. So this was text to image to create this particular image. And if I scroll up, because I used another one as a guide for image to image, it shows that under the mode right here. So under mode, it says image to image, meaning it was this little tab here. So it's using one image as a guide to create another thing. That's the image to image. And then the text to image under the mode is just when you're putting your prompt in under the text to image tab and creating an image from scratch. But yeah, you can also search. There's a little search bar here, so you can search for previous images that you made. I have over like 370 pages. That's after narrowing it down and trying to delete a bunch of stuff, because these things can take up a lot of space, and I'll show you how to like find hidden files in a second here. But yeah, that's your history tab. You can change it to see the older images first or the newer images first. So some of the older ones from one of my first looking videos here, you can see the prompt that was used, the model that was used, the mode that was used. So this was created using image to image to make these. This was the thumbnail I had for the longest. The strength that was used. The only thing missing from here is the sampler, because in this version of DiffusionBee at the time, I don't think it actually saved that information, what particular sampler was used. And they don't have that same one in the newest version, obviously. So that's the only thing that's missing from this information here. But yeah, you can switch from newest to oldest or oldest to newest and kind of navigate around your app like that. Next up is what we all been waiting for, Flux. So Flux has its own individual tab, although you can navigate it from your text to image drop-down menu too. So the XL models and the Flux models that you install will show up at the top of your drop-down menu for your models that you can select here. The ones that you download through DiffusionBee, again, will be at the very top here. So yeah, you can either prompt it here or under its own little unique tab here. You can prompt Flux. Under the Flux tab, it's similar to your text to image tab, where you have your prompt window, but you don't have an option for negative prompting. The only option you have when you toggle on the advanced settings is the option to choose the resolution. Now, based off of what some users have stated, playing around with the resolution has generated some little noise here and there, but overall the results are pretty good. And as I mentioned, there's about 3 different versions as the time of this release of this video. You have the Pro model, which is really high quality, but takes a really long time to generate, and that's only available through API. You have the Dev version, which is a base model. It's really good for general use, really high quality, but takes a little longer. Think of it like being the model in the middle there. It takes longer than the Schnell model, which is the fastest model, but it has slightly less quality. So Schnell is the fastest, a little less quality. Dev is better quality, but a little slower. And the Pro model is even better quality, but slower than the other two. So I tend to get better results from the Schnell model. So think of it like a step above your base model step, StableDiffusion. Then you have StableDiffusion XL, and then you have, StableDiffusion 2, then XL, and now you have this Schnell model. So it tends to be a lot more accurate to what you're asking it to do. The quality tends to be a lot better from very few steps. And I'll look at some examples here in a second. So before I dive into it further, I do want to show you out the box. Sometimes you can get some errors and some weird noisy stuff. So I actually had to restart the app, and I had to restart the computer just to kind of, just seemed to fix the issue after I did. But initially, when I was trying to run the Schnell model, which I have to run on my system because I have an older computer with not that much RAM, I can run the dev, which I do, but it just takes longer. It's more intensive on my little CPU, and the GPU, my computer's working hard. So the Schnell model works best for me, but even when I was trying before, I was getting weird noise. So it's still a little buggy here and there. So just try a few different times and you might get some pretty decent results. You just have to be patient. But I wanted to show you that yes, it doesn't always give you like the perfect results right out the box. Sometimes you do get weird little buggy things like this. But as I restarted it, I started getting better results that were a little bit more accurate. So this was with the dev model. And again, the dev model requires more steps than the Schnell model to get good results. So through the dev model, when I try to have it at like 2 steps and 4 steps, like some results were showing online, I wasn't getting good looking things. But when I did the same amount, same prompt with higher step counts, it started getting a lot better. So this is at 10 steps versus 4. And then same thing when it came to text. Sometimes it wasn't as accurate with the dev model and with the earlier step counts, but when I increased the step count, it started getting a lot more accurate. So even though the hands look good, the quality was decent, the text wasn't as accurate as I'd like it to be at a lower step count with the dev. But comparing the quality wise with step counts, again, this is Flux Dev. You know, it's not the worst, but it's definitely not the best at 8 steps. And then this was the Schnell model at 8 steps, which the quality is significantly better and requires less steps. Just kind of comparing the both models again. So the Flux Schnell model will only max out at 16 sampling steps, and the dev model maxes out at 75. So under the dev, if you go to sampling steps, you can max out at 75 steps. So there's a difference in step count. So I did want to rerun both of those prompts with the flowers. I ran the Schnell model at its max of 16 steps, and I think the quality looks amazing. The texture's there, the clarity is pretty on point. And again, we can run this through our technique to improve the quality using the tile mode. And then this is the dev at 16 steps, so even more well-defined as far as texture goes. Schnell wasn't bad, but the dev, I think by far has improved the overall quality and texture much more than the Schnell model. And again, this is only at 16 steps. So you have an older computer with less RAM like I do, you can still get some great results using the Schnell model. So again, this is from the Schnell model, and then this is from the dev model. So they both look amazing. It's just one's takes a little longer, but you can achieve really good quality. I haven't tried maxing this out on the number of steps just because it takes so long, but feel free to try on your own computer. But again, here was the dev model. I tried having a prompt that said Star Wars Yoda dresses a stormtrooper at 8 steps, at 2 steps. And then I reran that through the Flux Schnell model. And because, again, it requires less steps, lighter on my computer, I got better results. So it was accurate as far as the text was concerned and followed my prompt pretty accurately. So more examples of the dev, same prompt. It's just, it was, blurry because the lower step count there. I was really trying to push it with the low step count. Again, from my trial and error here, I just wasn't getting great results with the dev version at a low step count. But the text was getting more accurate as I was experimenting there with the low step counts. A few different times where it didn't quite get the spelling correctly, and sometimes where it was blurry and the text was a little garbled with the dev version. So as I increased the step count, the dev version definitely stepped up, and the quality wise was a lot better than the Schnell model from what I was testing out here. Flux dev at 25 steps, and it took pretty long for it to generate on my computer again because I'm running this with like 8 gigs of RAM. Whereas this was the Schnell model at around 2 steps. Again, as you saw with the upscaled version, you still can fix up things that don't look as great out the box. So this is an example of that where, looked a little rough. Quality wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. Throwing it through the upscaling image to image with the tile mode, it fixed a lot of the issues I saw. So you can imagine throwing something like the dev version at 20 steps into the image to image with that same method could probably significantly increase the quality of that as well. Just want to remind you that even though it may not look great when you initially do it, just keep on testing and playing around with this because you saw the end result of how this looked initially versus throwing it through the upscaling, which was this, where it increased the quality. And I would say it was pretty close to the dev version as far as the quality increase in face. So I continued to experiment and then tried again with the different samplers and see if that made a difference. Again, at a very low step count, the Flux Schnell model got the text pretty close to where I wanted it to be. But I think if I increased it to about 8 steps, it would have definitely gotten that a lot more accurately. So then bouncing back to the Schnell model again. So this was the prompt of the bee holding a sign. Spelling, the quality wasn't bad. The spelling wasn't exactly correctly like I'd like it to be, but you can see where the potential could be here if I increase the number of steps. And again, I was trying at like 2 steps for each one of these just to kind of compare. This is before I even knew that the dev needed more steps. So initially I was like, oh no, it looks terrible, but like, no, it's because I was using it wrong. And again, another example of Flux, you know, looking pretty good, but the text wasn't quite accurate. But understand is a lot more coherence to the text there. So another example of Flux where I was using the Schnell model at 4 steps this time. 4 steps seem to give me the accurate text and pretty decent quality. And again, that's at 4 steps. That's crazy. But yeah, so the spelling was correct. The font, I wish there's an option, which I imagine there will be very soon, to tweak the font. But the fingers are accurate. Again, the quality is not bad. I would throw something like this through the image to image with the tile technique to increase the overall quality. But again, this is before I even understood that the steps mattered when it came to the dev and the Schnell model. So this is dev. Again, was really noisy, but not really clear. So I was getting discouraged before I figured this all out. So I say that to kind of give you a heads up, like, no, you can make it look better. So these images of the puppy holding the sign, that was also created with the Flux model, as it was accurate to what I was asking, and the spelling was accurate to what I was asking, but you know, the quality needed that help. I thought this one was really cute, of the puppy behind the sign. It looked good, but the quality could be sharper. So when I tried throwing it through with just the sharpening and not adjusting the settings, I started losing the font accuracy. But having to play around with the influence of the original image, I got the font back to being accurate and an increase in quality. So you can achieve some fun and fantastic stuff. These are older examples of me using the illusion diffusion option to create like cities and stuff. But yeah, I wanted to test out how it looked with hands, and got the fingers looking really, really good compared to like original StableDiffusion stuff, which looked pretty rough when you try to get the hands to look right. Again, this is an example here where like the fingers are just looking wild with the original StableDiffusion. And this is like a realistic looking model. There's a few I've tested out. I like using the absolute reality and epic realism. And I'll probably tag those here in the video as well. But again, the dev at a low step count at 4. The text is getting better, but not great. And it was looking really, really, really pixelated still versus the Schnell model. So I know I'm repeating this, but I just want to kind of get it through your head. The Schnell model at a low step count can still look pretty good at around 4 steps. But the dev model definitely needs a pretty good boost in steps, like 10 and up, probably closer to 20 actually, but I still need to test this thoroughly. But just from my really, really rough experimentation, it needs a higher step count. This is the Schnell at around 8 steps. And then in B, do I look like I care? So you get really sharp vector art. Text is really accurate. I would probably take this to Inpainting and get rid of that little deal here. But yeah, you can really achieve some amazing stuff. So this is the dev model at 8 steps. B, do I look like? See, this is where it gets crazy. B, do I look like I care? So it got a little confused as to what was happening. Still not quite working out the bugs there. And then I really wanted to test out like from low to high count. So this is the dev at 2 steps. Then this is the dev at 4 steps. We're starting to form, you know, what I'm trying to get here at 6 steps. You know, a little less of that noise, still pretty accurate to what I'm asking. I asked for a seaside town, boats bobbing in the gentle waves, fisher folks mending nets, seagulls overhead, painting by Casper David Frederick. And this is at 8 steps there. So the noise again is significantly reduced from the original. 4 steps, 6 steps, 8 steps. And this is at 10 steps with the dev model. So the noise is still a little bit there. It's still looking so much better than it was before. So this is at 12 steps, and the noise is almost not noticeable, but I still see it there. But it's almost gone at 12. This is the, I hop back over to the Schnell model to kind of compare. So is that 2 steps? So for me, at 2 steps with the Schnell model, looks like the dev model at around like 6 steps. So like you can really make some really good looking stuff at really low counts. And then this is the Schnell at 4 steps. So I think with the Schnell, again, I don't want to talk too much because, you know, each person has their own like outcome. I want to say like 8 to 10, you're pretty good with the Schnell model. It's going to be pretty accurate with really no noise that's super noticeable. Like this is at 8. For me, it's pretty clear. And I can throw this to the upscaling technique to make it look better. This is the dev at 14 steps. At this point, the noise isn't really too noticeable, maybe in the shadows a bit. But I think at this point on, like if you're setting like a threshold kind of deal here, I would say 14 and up, you're pretty good. So this is at 16. It looks pretty good. There are a little bit of like artifacts of noise in the sails, and the seagulls look a little crazy. Some of these do, but overall it's pretty good. Either way, you can get this 18. Either way, you're getting good, if not significantly better images than you would from other models using samplers at low counts. So I would say like a realistic model using like a K Euler sampler at 20 steps still doesn't come anywhere close to this Flux model at like 18 steps. Like it's pretty dang good at a very low count. And this is at 20 steps here. So 20 steps with this Flux, not only do you get quality that's as good, if not significantly better than the other models using like a fast sampler like K Euler, but you also get accurate text. So like that alone puts this above and beyond like what's been out currently. So I also wanted to just mention, like, you know, it's super accurate with text. It's really follows your prompts very closely. So even though there's not the option to negative prompt, prompting will play a huge role in what you can do in DiffusionBee currently with something as simple as changing the emotion. So I had like a homeless adorable cat with a sad but cute face, and it gave me that. It gave me a little cat with a sad face holding a little cardboard box that says DiffusionBee now Flux, but it missed the with part, but it's okay. But changing the emotion of what you're asking it to do, you can kind of compensate. I guess I'm trying to say, like, you can compensate for not having negative prompts by having more accurate prompts themselves. So even though there's no option to say, hey, I don't want this to be sad, by telling it, hey, I want this emotion to be happy, it understands what to avoid that way. So I mean, until DiffusionBee does give you the option to negative prompt, you're just gonna kind of have to be more accurate with what you're asking from the prompt itself. But these are examples from the illusion diffusion option there. This is from the Flux Schnell model, the illusion diffusion, and then this was the upscaled version using that tile method. And then I had Cookie Monster sitting in an AA meeting for cookie addiction. So even though I prompted the cookies anonymous in the background, it did kind of mess up a little bit with the extra little text there. But again, this is the Schnell model. So the dev, I imagine, would be a lot more accurate with this. I wanted to get this video done in time, so I didn't get a chance to like fully test this to the max, but I got a lot of good examples out of playing around with this. Again, this is the Schnell model at 4 steps, accurate text to what I asked, detailed illustration. And again, you can ask it to be a specific style, like an oil painting, realistic, surrealism, pointillism, you know, just specific artist styles, and it will help your overall influence of what your image is going to look like. This is another example of illusion diffusion. And then this is it's supposed to be Oscar the Grouch, but I didn't quite understand what he looks like. Gave him glasses and stuff. And then I also asked for a sign to be there saying DiffusionBee Flux is finally here, but it didn't quite give me that when I tried to run it. So I think if I ran this a few more times, let's get, you know, something more accurate. But it just shows like the amount of detail and quality you can get from very low step counts, and not needing to cherry pick different images. So in like regular Stable Diffusion XL, I might have to run easily like maybe 6 or 10 different images before I get one that looks like this. And it definitely wouldn't give me text that was accurate. So this was one. You can read this whole prompt here. So this text was create a vibrant and inspiring cover image of a children's story about a small gray cat who becomes strong through sports and overcoming his bully. The cover should depict a determined looking cat standing confidently with visible muscles, lifting a heavy ball of yellow yarn. In the background, show a lush forest setting with tall grasses. Ooh, that's a typo. The typo, and it's still understood. Tall grass and a slightly surprised larger cat watching from a distance. The scene should convey a sense of growth, strength, and triumph. Use warm and earthy colors to create the friendly and inviting atmosphere. The title of the story, Sporty Cat, should be written in a playful, child-friendly font at the top of the image. So it gave me exactly what I asked for, even with the typo. Gave me the Sporty Cat title that was spelled correctly, the gray cat holding the ball of yarn, and another cat in the background. So if you are an author who wants to have illustrations, I know there's this whole discussion with AI art, and I stand on both sides of that fence. I understand the benefits and drawbacks from it, but if you need a really, really detailed illustration and you know how to convey what you're looking for very thoroughly, now with the advent of Flux, it doesn't even need to be as descriptive and still have really, really consistent quality images. We have the training, and I will link the video to training here. The process of training. So as it says to the top left here, to train a model on your own images, you need several training images with ground truth prompts. The images could be of an object or style. Please make sure that the images are formatted properly and the prompts are accurate. It can take a few hours to train a model. So in the beta test that I did, I've tried this a few different times. I just grabbed some images off of Pinterest, little cool graffiti style art. And I tried running this model previously, and it took maybe close to 7 to 8 hours, but now the speeds increased quite a bit. But because I am running stuff, my time has slowed down a bit again. I'll break down all this stuff in a second here. So before we even start worrying about any of this, we want to make sure our images are sized properly. So get your images, make sure that they're cropped and sized to at least the 512 by 512 size. To do that, there's a few different ways. You can utilize free resources online like Photopea, which is essentially like Photoshop, but for free and online to resize it. Or easier way is to use a service like birme.net. Essentially, it just allows you to batch resize an image or images. So I just dragged and dropped one example in here for you. And you can see this little bounding box is like a little square. That's the 512 by 512. I have the auto detect image focal point enabled, so that anything within this box is basically what's going to be focused on. So if you have multiple images you drag in here, whether it's on like a pet or an object or whatever, just make sure it's within inside of this box and you should be good to go. And then after you're done with that, hit save as zip and it will save it to your computer, and everything should be sized properly. Clean up your images and stuff as well, and make sure there's no weird like scuffs or whatever things you don't want the training to learn from in the image. So everything's sized properly. So what's next? Well, now's the tedious process of labeling every image. So yeah, you have your image, and then you need a text document that correlates with that image. So what I'm describing in this video is something called image captioning. It refers to a text document that has the same name as your image document, and it describes everything within that image. And I will also link the video that covers captioning here in a second. But if you have a image of, let's say, Poe the panda, you'd have to describe what he looks like, if he's wearing any clothing, what the background would look like, and everything that encompasses that image. So let's say we labeled that image as Poe number 1. The text document would also be called Poe number 1, but it would be a .txt file. And I will go into captioning now, so it's a little clearer on what captioning means. Imagine having to describe a soccer ball without being able to call it a soccer ball. How would you tackle it? Let's break it down. We could begin by saying that it's a spherical object commonly utilized in a well-loved sport involving kicking, or that it consists of panels and patches stitched together. We could describe its surface as interconnected geometric shapes, notably hexagons. We can go into details about what material it's made from. Leveraging these elements significantly enhances our AI model, allowing us to create a whole picture more accurately. We are creating a dataset of images and improving the dataset, making them smarter and more accurate to what we're asking. Incorporating these details into the captioning process, our AI models better understand subjects, people, and styles. Applying the same principle, let's take a look at Winnie the Pooh. Initially, we can simply describe him as a yellow bear with a red shirt. Gathering more images will help our model understand what he looks like in different poses, facial expressions, and situations. We can build a model that represents Winnie the Pooh. However, if you want to change small elements of that particular character, that's where captioning comes in play. Essentially, we're creating a dataset of images as well as a separate text document that coincides with each image. These descriptors in the text document help our model understand what's happening. See this example of a text document. Above, we can see a very vague description of Winnie the Pooh. So Winnie the Pooh, smiling face, small eyes, upturned eyebrows, standing. It doesn't really give us information as far as what's specifically happening in this image, the environment, or anything else. What we want to aim for is more details about the environment, camera angle, colors, items in the image, clothing, hairstyles, eye color, and more. When we bring the data into our training process, the model we create will be more accurate. Now we see the example on the bottom. It's a little bit more descriptive about what's happening. Winnie the Pooh, a cartoon bear, wearing a red shirt, standing in front of a bed, big belly, still frame, wearing a crop top, and it goes on and on and on. So we incorporate the camera angles, we incorporate the colors, we also mention things that are happening in the environment, background elements like the painting on the wall, and you can get as detailed as you can, ideally, especially when you're creating a model based on style. An important concept to understand is the variables that we want to allow to change within our captions. So for instance, if we're captioning for a character, there's certain things we want to change and there's certain things we don't want to change. So for example, if I want to make a model based off of Winnie the Pooh, his iconic look is a yellow bear wearing a red shirt. However, if I want to allow changes to be made to his shirt color, I would add in the descriptors in my text document, for instance, a red shirt. This will allow me to make changes later on if I want to change any color of a shirt in the process of creating this model. However, if I leave that off, the model will understand, okay, the red shirt is iconic to his look. This is something that does not change. The things that you want to be allowed to change in your model should be included in the captioning process. We know that he's a bear, so we won't necessarily need to add bear into the captions because we understand this is his look. It's something that we don't want to change. We understand that he has a little black nose and little black eyes. So this is something, again, we would avoid in the captioning process. When training, these are variables that we want to change or variables that we want to be left alone. So for this example, if I was training a model on this image, certain things I'd like to change would be the clock. So I would describe what's happening in the background. I would describe it as, a wall-mounted clock. It's a painting of a bee. I would go into details if it's a wooden clock that is nailed to the wall. I would describe his honey jars that are on the floor if I want those to be something that would change. I would describe them, how they look, the shape, the size, positioning, camera angle, any other details, any writing, anything I'd want on there. If I wanted to change the background elements, for example, the blanket on the bed, I would include that in the captioning process. I would include all these elements in the captioning process so the AI model knows these are things that I want to be able to change when generating images later on. Different variables you may want to consider when you're creating a model based off of a person are eye color, hair color, style of hair, if it's long, short, etc. However, again, if your character has a signature look and it's something that you don't want to change, don't include it in the captioning process. For instance, if your character, for this example, has a long nose or a muscular jaw, I wouldn't add that in the captioning process because that's a part of the look that I would want to keep and retain. Things you want to avoid when captioning would be repetitious words. Similar to prompting, repeating words will increase the weighting of the word or the influence of that word in the training process. Example, if you repeat the word background too much, that might give you 3 tags of the same thing. Things you would avoid in this image, for example, are saying that there's jars in the background, there's a tree in the background, there's a hallway in the background. All those 3 different descriptors have the word background in the image, which would increase the weighting of that tag in the training process. In general, I like to keep a rough format when I'm prompting. Still have a global word that you'd like to use, the perspective of the camera, the angle, an action word, a descriptor, and any other background elements and details you want to add at the end. This assures that the main weighting is focused towards the front, which will focus on what you're trying to create and the action that's happening. And any other descriptors are just added detail towards the end. Each image that you use will need the same level of captioning for each image. So if you have like 30 images, each one needs a text file that describes that image in detail. And that goes for if you're training it on a style, if you're training it on a character, or if you're training it on a concept. Let's say I had, well, this is a style I want, right? Most of the images have the same kind of look. So they all have like baggy pants, they all have sneakers and stuff. So I wouldn't have that in this prompt here because those are like variables that would change. I don't want those to be things that change because I want this look. So I would exclude that from here. You do want to have whatever your image prompt is. So for this example, I'm using graffiti style as my image prompt. So that's going to be in all of my text documents, graffiti style, whatever. What I was referring to in this video clip is something called a trigger word. This can often be found in models as well as LoRa. If you go on websites like civitai, you'll see a ton of examples under the download section. This is a word that should be implemented in your entire data set of text documents that correspond with each image. It's the word that activates your model. I demonstrated this earlier with the Jim Lee LoRa. So make it unique and something that wouldn't already be trained in other data sets. So not a very common word or a name. It should be something very unique that turns or activates your model or LoRa that you're training. So I have like, Spider-Man. So for this text document, it says graffiti style, Spider-Man with gray hoodie and sneakers. So this is telling StableDiffusion and DiffusionBee when it's training on it, hey, I want you to be able to change these things, these variables. I want you to be able to change the hoodie. And because I had the word gray in there, I wanted to focus on the color. I mentioned sneakers, so I wanted to be able to change the shoes. There are external programs like Pinocchio and a few other websites that allow you to create these text documents that will already caption the images for you. DiffusionBee currently does not have a auto captioning option within it, so unfortunately you do have to manually create all these text documents. I did create a very simple Python script that will just generate a batch number of text documents and the initial trigger word, but you would still need to add the detailed descriptions in that text document. So variables you want to be able to change are things you want to kind of incorporate in there. So I went ahead and used ChatGPT and made a little app. Essentially, it's a little batch file that will create the text. It'll get you half the way there. So it'll create the text document. You can label it whatever you want, and you can add at least the initial image prompt within that text document. And I'll show you that right now. So I'll have a link to this in the description as well. But essentially, it's a Python script, and I have a little README file in there. The README file breaks it all down. Tells you what it does, how to use it essentially, but it's pretty straightforward. So what you're going to do is drag and drop the batch text file .py, it stands for Python if you're new to this stuff. Drag it to your desktop. And I've already done this, but I'll just replace it, it's fine. You're going to go ahead and open Terminal. You can either use your little search bar or go under the apps and then utilities and click on Terminal. Either way, get to Terminal, and we're going to make a brand new one here. So in Terminal, you're going to basically just copy these 2 lines of script. I made it really, really, really simple for you. So you're gonna go and scroll down to where it says, the reason I drag and dropped it to the desktop is just, it's easier for me to find, so I made it like that for you guys. So you're gonna copy this CD and the little line there, and then desktop stuff. You have this little line here. Copy that, paste it into the terminal, then press enter. Then you're gonna copy the next one that says this Python batch text document, all that stuff there. You're gonna copy this little line, copy, paste it in the terminal, and press enter. So here's the part that's gonna save you a ton of time. So now I have a few prompts that are gonna pop up for you as it says in the descriptor here. First, you're gonna enter how many text documents do you want to create. So this correlates with how many images you have. So if you had 50 images, if you had 10 images, you have 11, however many it is, we're going to create that amount of images, or sorry, text documents. So for this example, for this data set, I had, let's see, 20, what would that be? 28, 29 images. So I would say, I'm just going to say 10 for this example. That's fine. So I want you to create 10 text documents. Then you're going to press enter. The next prompt is going to say, all right, what's the default text for each document? So this would be your image prompt. So for this, we're just going to call this YouTube. And then the next prompt is going to say, all right, what do you want to name the document? So I'm going to have you create a folder for this stuff. So what do you want to name the folder? I'm going to say like YouTube cut. All right. So far we told it how many text documents we want to make. We told it what the image prompt we want to use in the text document. And we've also told it what the document folder it should be called. Next is going to have one more prompt. Where do you want to save the folder? So by default, again, I have it just as a desktop thing, just so it's easy to find. So you don't even do anything but press enter. So now you'll have a brand new folder on your desktop. So now on my desktop, I have a folder called YouTube tutorials, or YouTube, what do I call it? YouTube tut. So within each one of these documents, it's numbered, right? So again, I got you halfway there. So I'd recommend, if you had all your images already, fixed, sized, and labeled, I would, for example, for this, I think I just called this like graffiti 1 through like, how was it, 28? So yeah, I had it. It was labeled as graffiti 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So that's exactly how I would have this, like graffiti 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now that that's done, it'd be labeled. The numbers would match up. So then you still have to kind of go and add the description. But again, at least part of the description is done already for you. So this would be your image prompt. For this example, I just had YouTube. So in this data set, there's like this monster spray can, for example. So I had that labeled as, graffiti style monster spray can, cyclops eye, large mouth with exposed teeth. And you can go on a little further if you wanted to. You can say like the color of it. You can say little elements around it, floating particles, drooling, spit out of mouth, or whatever you want to add to it. But you're going to go through all of your images. Again, I tried to do as much of the heavy lifting as I could, but you still have to kind of go in and add the additional information there. But once that's all done, finally, back in DiffusionBee, you'll choose where this information is. So I have my data set. That's what these things are called, by the way. This is a data set of information. So it says path of data set. Please choose the folder containing the training images, prompts, image and prompts. Every image should have a corresponding ground truth prompt. So that's the text document we're talking about here, with the same name. So that's the script that I made for you. So you're going to choose where that's located. So I just have it on my desktop. And then you're going to choose where you want your model to end up. So I just chose the same location. And then the fun part is you can choose what base model you want. So you can use the default StableDiffusion that comes with this. You can use essentially any model you can import into DiffusionBee, you're going to use as your base model. So I just use one of my old ones, and I'm keeping the resolution at 512. Oh yeah, by the way, that's the highest resolution you can train currently. So this would be like your base level StableDiffusion models. That's the 512 by 512. So I chose that setting, and then of course you want to label your model. So I just called it Graffiti version 3 because this is the third version I'm trying. And then training iterations. So this is where it gets a little tricky. You have to experiment with this a bit and the model size. Just a rough rule of thumb for like a style, for instance, you're going to take however many images you have and multiply it by like 100. So for this example, I had 28 images, so multiplied by 100, that's 2,800 iterations. So I put that there. And for the model size, I just left it as the default. And as it mentions here, how large the model should be. Larger model will take longer to train. So if you have it set to 128, I hope you have a pretty powerful Mac, because it's going to take a while. So I don't. This thing's going to take a while, and I have it set pretty low. But again, the speed has increased significantly. So the first model I trained, it was close to like 8 hours. The second model I did, as the creator of this app increased the speed, get it down to like 6 hours. And for this version, I'm testing this out again, but I'm also throwing more images at it, so it kind of like offset the speed difference there, honestly. But once that's all done, and you're just gonna press start. And if you have everything set up correctly, everything labeled correctly, all the text documents are labeled correctly, it's gonna load for a quick second and then show you the amount of images you have on here. It'll make this nice little preview window, this grid window here, and then it'll tell you how much time is left, how much time per image it's going to take to generate, essentially, or iteration it's going to take to generate. So you see the training iterations, the total number will be at the top there, and then to the left of that is how many it's gone through. So now that we covered training and we know what the models are, what the history tab is, how to access the Flux tab, we have the LoRa portion here. The LoRa section in DiffusionBee isn't quite like training a model. The LoRas itself are actually going to merge to a base model. So I covered this in a previous video, which I will link here. Picture this shirt being our base model. It's the overall shape that we want. Our LoRa that we'll be using is essentially the style that we want to put on that shirt. After you merge them together, you'll have a brand new model with the base model, which is like the overall shape, and your LoRa, which is like the overall style that's being applied to that shirt. LoRa tools, which you can access on the left-hand side, or from the home menu by clicking LoRa tools on the bottom, it'll bring you to this window here. You're going to choose your safetenor file, and you're going to choose your LoRa weights. From here, you have the option to choose from 0 to 1, so 0.5, 0.3, etc., etc. Label the model that you want to call it, choose the output folder, and press start. Regardless of the model you're using, without the proper prompts, your images may not turn out so well. So play around with different prompts and art styles, and even artist names, as those will drastically change the outcome of your image. Try out Hayao Miyazaki for Studio Ghibli style, anime, sharp lines, vector art, digital painting, oil painting, indie game, black and white noir, so on and so forth. Again, regardless of the models you're using, without using the proper prompts, your images may not turn out so well. So take some time, try out different negative prompts and regular prompts to see what you can add. Using prompts like atmospheric, volumetric lighting, dark, gloomy, bright, sunny, vivid, colorful. Those will also change how your overall image will look. Try out different camera angles, such as a wide shot, close-up, mid-shot, Try out different art styles like anime style, line art, manga, pencil drawing, etc. You can alter the skin by adding things like visible detail, fuzz, hair, wet, shiny, etc. You can alter how metallic objects look by saying, reflective surface, rusty, old, withered, decrepit, etc. like that. So you want to play around with different words and see how that can alter or enhance your overall image. So have fun with proper prompting and play around with some words that you can add. Let's do something fun and try merging multiple models. So far, I have the floating head and chibi model merged. So let's add a third. I'm going to go to the LoRa tools, choose my merged model, which I already created, which is a safe tensor. I'm going to select the chibi-based floating head style. I need to choose a LoRa. Let's try something different. So I'm going to merge those two with the tattoo style that I created earlier. You'll notice that the LoRa file is much smaller than your regular safe tensor. I'm going to choose open. And now we can choose the ratio. How much of this do we want to influence? So let's start off with 0.3. You have to name this now. So this is now the floating head chibi tattoo. You now have to choose the output directory. Once you have that selected, you can press start. So this doesn't take too long, but it's going to read the LoRa weight, which is our tattoo model, and the one that we merged previously, which is the floating head and the chibi model. So now we're going to technically have 3 different models merged together. Success! Now our models merged together, and we can utilize that. So to import this, we're going to go under our model, import, select the model that we just created, choose open. So this might take a little minute for it to import the model. Now our model is fully imported, so we can go back into our text prompt. So I want to remember what the original image looked like, is choose actions and then generate similar images, and we'll just stop that generation. But now we have all those settings copied over, and I'm going to switch my model back to the floating head chibi tattoo model now. So I have all the same settings, all the same seed numbers, everything that was in the previous original generation of this, but this is what our merged model. So let's see what this looks like. Now our image is finished generating, and we can compare the original with this brand new model. We can also see the influence already taking place with that tattoo model. There's a lot of darker shading happening. It's a little bit more vector art influenced. Again, here was the original, which was the floating head model, now merged with the chibi model as well as a tattoo model. So we have 3 models merged into one. So unlike some of the other apps out there, DiffusionBee is very unique in this sense, where your models are blended together and they're brand new safe tensor models. So I can continue to add that back in here, add a brand new LoRa, and then I'll have a merger of essentially 3 different models. It should be worth noting that not every model and LoRa will be compatible or usable within DiffusionBee just yet. There have been a few bugs reported, but those should be worked out pretty soon. Sometimes it may be overtrained and it'll look like if you had applied too much sharpening around the edge, it just won't look good. You'll know what I mean when you generate these images. And you just kind of have to keep playing around until you find the sweet spot. You deform video and interpolator. So deform video, I'm not going to run this because it just takes so long to do. But with this, it's similar to the interpolator, but you have an option. It looks a little different from your text to image. Same concept though. As you enter a prompt here, the thing you can change are the number of frames. So if you're into videography or animation, this would be kind of familiar with frames, but the increased amount of frames, and you can change you need to input a starting seed number here. You can change the motion of an image, like the direction that things are going, using these. So angle, zoom, and movement X and movement Y. So I wish these are turned into sliders. Again, that's my own personal wish for this app. But you can put in up to 4 different prompts here, and then you can have a negative prompt, again, things that you don't want to see in this, and it will generate from there. You can select your sampler, your guidance scale, and under miscellaneous, your V prediction. So I'll just use the thumbnail example they have here. So you can generate your image and then the motion. So you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pan left, pan right, go up, go down. And you can have a lot of really good fun with this. I don't personally use this portion of the app that much. If anything, I might use the interpolator, which you can see in this thumbnail. It turns from one image to another. So it's kind of like image to image, but with the specifically with like morphing things in the video versus focused on movement within the video. So Deform, think of it like movement in the video, and Interpolator is more like morphing from one thing to another. So under the Interpolator part, which looks like this little film looking reel here, I have this video, it's more like a GIF of a cat turning into a bumblebee. So I have a cute cat sitting in a library, and then the end prompt is a cute bumblebee sitting on a sunflower. I should have probably kept it consistent, but whatever. But you can kind of see where it warps from being a cat. This little face starts morphing into a bee. The pattern in the fur starts turning more striped like the bee. If I had a higher step count, this would probably look a little smoother. But from here, again, you can change the frames, seed number. You need to input a starting seed number and an output seed number. And from here, just like before, you can select your model. You can select the resolution here though. So I have this set pretty low because a higher resolution would take too long. But note, this has also been in the earlier versions of DiffusionBee. There is a limit to the resolution you can set for your interpolator video. So you can only go up to 768 by 768. So if you want to make it larger, you'll probably have to use an external application to do so, like a Topaz video or something. So you can also adjust the sampling steps. So again, as we mentioned before, how many times the sampler steps will be affected by what sampler you use. So you can get away with quality stuff really quickly using a sampler like K-Euler Ancestral versus a DDIM sampler that requires around 40 steps to generate a decent looking image. And note that this is going to be for every one of these images. So every frame is its own individual image. Same thing with the Deform video. If you have your images set to like, 768 by 768 with like a really high step count, because it has to do that for every one of those images. So yeah, so keep that in mind. So for 40 frames, it had to generate using all these same settings. So be patient. I would say go ahead and start it and watch a movie in the meantime, and by the time the movie's done, it should be done. Depending on what you have. So that's why I set mine so low. But the guidance scale, as we mentioned before with the other tabs there, how far to the left you have it set, it'll be more creative. How far to the right you have it, it's more literal of what your text to input prompt is. Under the miscellaneous drop down, again, you have the V prediction. I'm pretty sure I used this for the example I have on my civitai account. So under civitai, my account here, I have this older model. At this point it's old, but I mean, this was just created like this year. In the AI world, this is ancient. But under the Atomic Comic Monster 8000, you can see the demo of what I had used this before, this interpolator for. I had turned an old Volkswagen into a more modern, futuristic looking Volkswagen using the same technique. So I put like a Volkswagen from some year into the 1920s, and then the prompt changed it to like whatever futuristic year I picked there. But it took a little minute to generate, but it made a really fun looking GIF thing, but you can use that for whatever. So, and another example of that motion that I was referring to. So this is the interpolator video of it, and this would be a Deform video as an example. See this motion? So it's changing. I had the same prompt as like a really old Volkswagen turning into like a futuristic one, but I added that motion of it to go to the right. So that's why this thing is moving off screen. While it's moving off screen, there's other stuff that's happening on the left here. But you can create some little fun stuff that way. So that pretty much covers the entirety of the app. I know that was a whole lot, and I appreciate all of you for being so patient and sitting through all of it. So while the technology continues to evolve, I'll try to keep up with what's happening. I think I probably should use this section here. Like, I know I haven't been as consistent with this, and I keep saying that stuff because I mean, that's just how life is. There's this huge debate about AI stuff, and I understand both sides of that argument. From a creative point, I use it myself to generate like reference images if I'm trying to come up with a painting and I'm struggling to get like an idea down and I want something that I can't find online. Like I'll use it for a reference image to generate some really fun stuff. Like if I want to, you know, make a bumblebee sitting on a couch, I wouldn't know how to like go about thinking about where to start with this thing. So I would generate an image like this with AI. So that's the fun part of it, right? So the argument being that yes, it can take from some creators. It has been used maliciously in the past to take from creators. It doesn't give credit to some of the people that it trains stuff from. It could be used maliciously. It could be used for really harmful things, and people have tried to use it during like our current times with wars. For me, there's a fear that, I mean, it's just the technology is it's unbound. It's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle, to put brakes on this stuff. All you can really do is just navigate that boulder going downhill by trying to sway it in the right direction. So I do a lot of things that are in the creative field, and it's affected me on every facet. When it came to editing audio, as an audio engineer, I would say most of the work that I would have done for shorter projects like editing podcasts and dialogue for audiobooks have kind of faded away within a month. I mean, that's just being super real. I mean, probably a little more than that, but like it's highly affected it. So for example, what would have taken an audio editor like myself, something that can take you all day to edit, like AI was doing this edit within like 15 minutes. So it scared me to like crazy because it just made everything I went to school for, everything I trained for and learned about feel almost obsolete. So like I get where that hurt, that pain, that frustration, and that fear comes from when it comes to AI stuff, because it can affect you. It can affect people's livelihoods. It can take away work from people, because I'm literally seeing it firsthand. And honestly, there's not a lot you can do when it comes to certain parts of AI stuff. So again, this comes from both sides of that fence. I see it from both sides. So as a creative person, this is a wonderful tool. I wish I would have had when I was younger, trying to get into art and learning how to draw and try to brainstorm ideas. I wish this was a tool that's available for me, because I can definitely see the uses of like how this can benefit people. This would be phenomenal. But when it comes to protecting it as an artist, like if someone were to try to train something off of my own art style, I can see where that would be really scary. I can see that there's really nothing in place to stop that. And if you're kind of following the trends that have been happening on social media, there was like a whole exodus of artists moving from one platform, like Instagram, to others, because there was this fear that people were taking their art, and Instagram itself had implemented something to train its own AI models. So the problem that we're encountering, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but the problem that can be encountered, I should say, is that there's really no way to kind of fight it now. There's certain tools that are available that can, this is a whole nother video in itself, but can poison what they call a data set when it comes to like training your models. You know, you have a collection of images on a person, on an object, or a style. You can throw it through certain things like Nightshade, and there's like a handful of other ones that kind of do the same thing. They make it so the AI doesn't understand what it's looking at, and you might give it a picture of a cat and it sees it as a picture of a camel, so it doesn't quite know what it's really learning from. Other than that, I don't see a huge way you can protect your art as an artist, regardless if people move to these other platforms, which I understand why they did. I get it. They don't want to lose the rights to their artwork. They don't want their artwork being used without their permission. I understand all that. But there's really no way to kind of avoid this technology that's out there now, other than these handful of tools that can kind of just make it more difficult to get there. It's the equivalent of when people started adding watermarks on their photos, you know, for photographers, and the artists started adding watermarks to their art. It won't stop someone from doing it. It can deter someone from trying to do it, but it won't stop the technology that's out there. So this is the hill that like I see where both heads clash on this talking point. Again, I see it from the artist side, and I see it from, I see it from the creator side. I see it from the person who made some AI models. So like, I get both ends of that argument, and I can only offer like a handful of tools that are out there to kind of protect your own artwork. I say that after saying this whole video, right? Because I understand the importance of this stuff. Like, you should be protecting your artwork. It should be tools out there as easy to do that as there are with these tools to train your models. But the reality of it, there aren't that many tools that are as simple as like dragging and dropping and getting your stuff going. A lot of them require some more heavy duty processing, and it should be as easy to make a model as it is to protect your own artwork. That's just what it should be, but it's not. That's just with the photo side of things. With video, this is a whole new era that we're entering with video, and a whole new era we're entering with audio stuff, where they're able to clone and reproduce things easier and easier. And again, this is me after I just made this video on this whole AI application. I love this application. I still will use this application, but I'm not naive to the use cases that, may come from people using apps for malicious ways. So the video and the audio stuff is probably what scares me the most, because I don't really see a way for people to really protect themselves, and it's only become easier to do really crazy things with these tools. So I say all that to say I encourage people to use these tools, to learn these tools, but don't be by any means naive about these tools, and be smart about protecting yourself from tools like this as much as you can, I should say. Adding watermarks again to your art, it's helpful, but it's not going to keep someone from really using your stuff if they really want to. That's just not, unfortunately, it's not. Anyone with enough time and know-how can do with your art and create models and all that stuff. So again, I don't want to discourage you from doing this. I want you to use these tools because it's here now. It's never going away. These are tools for people to use, and the ones who don't know how to use them or aren't using them will be left behind. That's just where we're going. Yeah, I know that was a heavy note to end on. I want to say this though, or I should say I want to add to this, is that not every person who makes AI has evil and malicious content that they're trying to do with it. For me personally, I can be super transparent with you all, is me getting into using AI came from a place of healing. So I initially got into this after the passing of my mother, and for me it was a way to kind of reconnect with her and be able to create a model. So I got into this to learn how to actually heal. So I used the tools available to make models off of, anything, objects, art styles, people. And I was able to create something fun, something that matched her level of humor, because she was a huge sports fan. So for me, I was able to put her in like hilarious situations where she's dressed up as like her favorite sports team, or like dunking on Michael Jordan or something, So for me, it was a way to actually heal and like mourn and help with my grieving process. That's why I got into AI art stuff and started using it as a tool. I had to learn it from the ground up. I didn't know anything about coding, so when I came across this app, DiffusionBee, I wanted to learn how to use it. And then it became a possibility to train your own stuff. So I had to learn all the vernacular. I had to learn all the tools and how they interact with each other, and everything was developing so fast. That's why I got into using this AI art stuff, me personally. So I say that again to say not everyone who uses the stuff comes at it with a malicious intent or some, any of that kind of angle. Some come at it just for to explore this new medium. Some want to use it to coincide with whatever they're creating. Some want to use it as a teaching thing, which I also have done. It really does help you kind of like push yourself creatively to kind of think of how you want to describe something, like almost like a filmmaker mindset. Like if you're coming up with a scene for a film, I want this camera to come at a low angle and this kind of light of day and this kind of mood, and this, it forces you to kind of be more creative that way. But yeah, it's not all bad, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. And I also use it alongside of doing traditional medium. So in a weird way, not only did it help me heal, but it pushed me to go back to what I love to do in using traditional art tools. For me, and what I hope that you get from this video and more, is the knowledge of how to use this tool, how this tool is being used along with others in the vernacular out there, but opening your idea to not all this stuff is bad and evil, and it can be used for some really beautiful things. So with that being said, and I know this is a very long video already, I'm going to wrap it up here. I just want to truly say I really appreciate all of you for following, for watching, and for kind of growing along with this journey. As I got into this, I didn't know a darn thing about AI art, and I didn't know anything about like what prompts were. I didn't know anything about what LoRa's and weighting and any of this stuff was. But it's been really, really fun to be able to see it grow and to see it kind of evolve into what it is. I just really appreciate everyone who's been following this channel for so long and being supportive, and I hope you continue to do that, and I can continue to make more fun stuff. Again, I want to use these as tools to kind of help as I grow as an artist too, alongside with the stuff I do, because I love airbrushing. So I've been using this as a guide to help me create some really fun ideas to airbrush. But yeah, so maybe I'll cover that in another video if you want. But I'm gonna wrap this up here. And again, I just truly, sincerely appreciate all of you for watching this video and making it all the way through the end here. And if you want to, I have a ton of stuff available on the civitai that you can play around with, different models and stuff to kind of get you going and maybe inspire you to make some really fun stuff of your own and train your own art styles. All right, y'all. I'll talk to you soon. Be safe out there. Peace.
Diffusion bee, show me light, make my visions come to life. Art from prompts to delight, every touch I feel the vibe.